You are listening to episode 188 of Mitolife Radio. I am your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Bryant Meyers, that wrote the book PEMF, The Fifth Element of Health. Learn why pulsed electromagnetic field therapy supercharges your health like nothing else. I bought this book several years ago, probably 7-8 years ago, when I bought the SOTA magnetic pulsar device, which I asked him about in the interview. This is just jam-packed. I mean, over 3 hours long. I really got into the details with him about this therapy, and we talked about multiple different brands and devices and their efficacy. And what's really cool is that Bryant doesn't have any financial gain in talking about any brand because he's not affiliated with any. He only makes money on his book sales, and I am not affiliated with any PEMF device at the moment, besides the $200 or $300 one on my website, the SR1. That's the only one, and it's a very small price tag versus these PEMF mats that get into the multiple thousands of dollar ranges, anywhere from $5,000 up to $10,000. I've even seen more than that. So he talks about what to look for in a PEMF therapy device. He talks about where we would get it in nature, why we might want to supplement it with the device. He talks about the difference between the Doug coils, the coil-like devices that you can find for PEMF therapy, and the mats, which he likes more, thinks that they're more effective. Talks about what PEMF does to our body, all of the different health benefits, what it does to water. Talks a little bit about red light therapy, the power of photobiomodulation on our body. And then I get into a lot of Q&A questions. I got through most of them. So some of the questions are, how is this different from scalar technology? Does PEMF block the harmful effects of EMF while in use? Can a high non-native EMF environment interfere with how PEMFs benefit the body? Can PEMF therapy have a negative effect, and in what instances? How is it different from grounding? Recommendations for a good PEMF product. Is it beneficial for neuropathy, nerve regeneration? Can you sleep on a PEMF mat all night? If you don't feel anything from it, was it not needed? Can it help heal a dog's muscular injury? What is his opinion on south polarity versus north polarity? Is there a DIY? Can you build one yourself? Does the shape of the wiring provide any benefit? Are there long-term use studies? What can you do for EMFs? What are the best headphones? And a lot more. Definitely have out your notepad for this one. It's very dense with information, and it was a lot of fun. So enjoy the show. Here is Bryant Meyers. All right, we are here with Bryant Meyers. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've been chatting on the phone the past few days and talking about PEMF, stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And I actually bought your book several years ago. I don't know, it was probably 6-7 years ago, something like that. The Fifth Element of Health. And I loved it. I was just getting into trying out PEMF and just learning about magnetism in general, not only devices. And your book was very helpful for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, written in 2013, and it actually has sold about 100,000 copies now, or a little more than that. So it's still going really strong. And people are, and even though I have the outline for either another book or a really radically expanded second edition, that's still probably maybe a couple of years out. But I do a lot of things I've learned and added that you can find on my YouTube channel. Actually, if you want to see a preview of my next edition, you could just watch a lot of my videos I've done since 2000, basically 14 or 15. But it's a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of cool stuff I learned about how PMF really works, what the ideal signal is, just a lot of things that you need to know, understanding intensity and frequency, which really aren't the most important thing, even though they're pretty much all that's talked about. And it's a lot. I mean, I just going through it all would probably take an hour, just all the things, but we'll keep the interaction going so that way I can sort of, kind of tune into the questions you have and your viewers have.
Yeah, well, yeah, I want to get into those details for sure, but just standard introduction, like how you got into this. You used to be a physics professor, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I taught 5 years. And even back at Georgia Tech, when I was pre-med, then I changed to physics. I ended up with a bachelor's in physics. But I lived with last year of my Georgia Tech finishing my degree. I lived with this lady, Liz Short, who was at the time one of the top radionics people in the world, and she was incredibly knowledgeable on natural healing. Everything from fasting to juicing to colonics and she was an iridologist. She was very good at looking at your iridology chart based on Bernard Jensen's interpretation of it. On and on and on. I just learned just like an immersion in natural healing type of protocols. But the main thing for me was the radionics and the frequency-based energy medicine. That was new, because I'd worked at GNC, so I knew about nutrition and supplements and all that. But I didn't really understand that energy can heal and just how profoundly. And she worked on a lot of animals, a lot of dogs, which have no placebo effect, right? So powerful, right? You got dogs that don't know, and they're getting better, from these different conditions that she's treating them for. And so that kind of, along with concurrent to my teaching as an adjunct professor for different colleges, which was, adjunct means kind of part-time. I was still working I had a TV show called Forever Young. I wrote articles for the Healing Garden Journal. I was doing nutritional counseling. I had this little company, Full Spectrum Health, which kind of was my beginning of my energy medicine concept of the elements of health. Earth, that I talk about in my book, earth is food, water is water, fire is like light and heat and infrared, air is oxygen therapy, deep breathing, those type of devices that deal with air. And then the fifth element, or at the time I didn't really have this fully conceptualized, but the fifth element, as I call it now, is kind of more the energies of the earth. And we now know that we need the Schumann resonant frequency. We need certain frequencies from the sun, we at certain times of the day, even ideally. And we know that actually even the telluric currents, for earthing and grounding. I don't know if that's as essential as some of the sunlight and PEMF, but certainly, the book Earthing, and a lot of good research by, James Oshman loves to talk about this in his book, excellent book, Energy Medicine, and the electric field of the earth. But electric field doesn't penetrate as deep as do microcurrents as PEMF. So that was kind of my fundamental thesis. I kind of it evolved into understanding that what nature is giving us is what we need. The best whole organic foods, the best spring waters. I mean, I invested probably over 80,000 or more on water, all these fancy, elaborate water generating setups that filtered, did RO, added minerals to it, spun it through a Victor Schauberger vortex, stored it erased the memory, like little magnetic field. Magnetic fields erase memory in water. Stored in a Victor Schauberger golden phi ratio egg, which keeps the water kind of going a little cooler. But I still don't think you can beat spring water. Just for trying to get it, if you can find, findaspring.com, if you can find a good spring, which is becoming harder and harder. But so but still that fundamental thesis, Victor Schauberger, comprehend and copy nature. If you're not getting enough of nature's elements, then try to understand what nature is giving us. And then you can't do better than nature. So try to do your best to copy nature. And that was the Granger, whatever they call it, those water system were based on Victor Schauberger's ideas. And they were what they were trying to do was to mimic nature's full hydrological cycle, nature's way of making water, and had just a little bit of minerals and just the right pH, not overly alkaline and not, too wildly high in minerals and all. So that really got my attention within water. It's like Edward Lauren is a guy here in town. I learned he wrote a book on water. He was just a genius. And he's the one that made this elaborate water processor that used German grade reverse osmosis filters that got down to 0.0 parts per million solids, right? And but the big aha from his book was, yes, what we really need is what nature is giving us. So with water, we don't want to create these exotic waters with super high pHs or all these, exotic, scalar energies programmed. I mean, that might be good. I'm not saying it's not bad. It's like the best water. In fact, even if you're going to program frequencies, because water can be programmed, one of the best frequencies to use is 7.83 hertz. And that BioPro pitcher which was based water pitcher where you put water in, and it actually was pulsing like a little 7.83 pulsar in there. So that was a big aha for me, really, and that was kind of the guiding inspiration of my book, and really understanding that PEMFs are not just good for you, like the cosmonaut, the Russian space program, U.S. space program uses those little Schumann generators in, even in some of the shuttle launches, based on what I was reading in Energy Medicine by Richard Gerber. He mentioned this, and I'm like, and they kind of keep hidden some of this stuff, so it's a little hard to find this information online. And some of Dr. Fisher's stuff, he worked with the Russian space program, so he confirmed that the Russians were using these frequencies out in space. But it makes sense though. We know out in space that in microgravity or very low gravity that your bone density goes down, because we need gravity too, by the way, and wounds don't heal as quickly. And again, the Schumann pulse, well, it just kind of throws off your rhythms, and the underground bunker studies and the zero field studies showed that. I talk about that in my book.
I love all that. I love how you're putting out little tips. People love shows like this, just all this practical information. And one question I had for you, like Faraday cages, because you've been talking about the Schumann resonance and shielding, So I converted half my garage here in this house to a sensory deprivation float room. I think I told you that in one of our calls. And I put two layers of Y-Shield paint, that like graphite material. I think it was their ultra version, because they have different Y-Shield paint strengths. This was like their super strength or whatever. And my question to you is that harmful? Because I think I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were saying that could potentially stop the heart for a minute if you're not getting exposed to, the natural field. So there's kind of a big debate over like Faraday caging and blocking. And you mentioned the timing, right? It's kind of a complex thing.
Well, it's part of the problem. So what Dr. Nakagawa, in his Japanese study, he looked at these workers that were inside of concrete and steel all day long, the concrete. And he found they were getting bad, increased sensations of pain, lethargy, and lack of energy. They weren't sleeping well. They were slightly depressed. And by introducing, I think he did use both the static magnets and the pulse magnets. I think in this study he was just static magnets, but he was like giving them a supplement of magnetic field therapy, and the symptoms improved. And of course, that's part of the problem, is the shielding. But I get the dilemma, because with 5G towers now, and all this, we're just getting irradiated from all directions. You do want to shield that out, so it's just kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. So one of the things you could do, like the Russian space program, is you can, especially if you're near a cell phone tower or something that's, I always use search.com and make sure. I mean, if I'm going to move somewhere, I am not going to move anywhere near a cell phone tower. With 5G towers, it's going to be hard, because they're going to put them in every corner, so 5G has a very short wavelength, so it has to be really close to you. You can't go as far as 4G. It's just based on of very, very high frequencies. They get absorbed too easily, right? So what you're doing, but what you need to do is you need to get like a Schumann generator somewhere in that room. That's ideally, not like Earth Pulse makes those ones you can plug in the wall, and they're kind of just, but you can also do like a really good PMF device like IMRS or Beamer, some low frequency, low intensity. What that does is it also just gives you like an infusion or a burst. But I would want a Schumann pulse generator going all the time, in that room,
I mean, does the time, if I'm only in there for an hour and a half, is the time really bad? I mean, is it more if I'm in there for 8 hours that it would be?
You actually might get a beneficial hormesis effect by being in there for just an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So create a little bit of stress on the body, but then the stress the body will respond by creating compensatory pathways to make you stronger, right? But there's been hormesis studies with that, so I don't know if that's the case. But I don't think an hour. But listen to your body. I mean, you'll know if you feel fine and energetic, and there's no difference in your overall energy before and after, then I was probably okay. But scientific.
Yeah, the reason why I bring this up too is like those Faraday canopies for beds are so popular. I think companies are sprouting up all the time to where, you can cover underneath the bed even, and then drape it over.
I think you're better with like the really good, like the key coil or some of those coils that can really absorb some of that electrosmog. Mm-hmm. And just getting, like, I live out in the country, I live more downtown. I moved out in the country away from cell phone towers. I opted out of my smart meter. You can Ethernet all your computers. You can hook them up to Ether. I mean, I do have Wi-Fi. I mean, I turn Wi-Fi when I have to, of course. It's sometimes just not practical to use Ethernet all the time. But I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of systematically go through your house and just get rid of a lot of these sources. And I pay a penalty every month to be opted out of my smart meter. I have to pay the electric company because they have a guy comes to my house. I don't always see him, but I was like, hey, how's it going? And he comes up and reads my meter. I said, he kind of gets it too. He's like, yeah, I'm with you, man. These things are kicking out all that microwave radiation. You don't want that bursting into your house in very chaotic bursts, just like the towers do. It's not only high frequency, but it's like someone like putting their nails on a chalkboard. I mean, it's just it's a very, choppy, disruptive, cacophonous waveform that's going to be, not only a high frequency, dangerous, but it's just the way the wave bursts are created is just makes it even worse.
Mm. Yeah, my Starlink router, I unplug it at night, but I have one of those router shields. It's like a mesh made of metal around it, and then I have like a shungite plate under it because I did find one or two studies on shungite and EMFs. Like it's interesting, so I figured it can't hurt to just put it on a.
That's something I want to look. I want to take a deeper dive into that. I've just been busy with a lot of things, but with all these 5G technologies rolling out, I'm going to definitely take a deep dive into that. I mean, I know a fair amount, but I'm not up to date on all the latest products,
Yeah. Because I think to me, Orgonite's BS. I don't know. I've never seen a study on it. I used to make little tower busters, throw them at towers and place them all around the house. And I've never felt anything from any Orgonite ever in my life. So I question that.
A little magnet, like a wire and like the crystal, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's different ways to make it. I mean, and I had a whole meditation pyramid, a big one that had little Orgonite things in every corner, big elaborate ones too. I mean, I don't know if there's not really much science. That's the problem with energy medicine is you have all these, and there's just, to me, the ones that have the really good science, like we're talking thousands of studies, is photobiomodulation, red light therapy, or low level laser light therapy, PEMF, microcurrent type of therapies. So there's just not that many forms of energy medicine that, like, Rife doesn't have really that much. There's not much research on Rife frequencies. I mean, you got Royal Raymond Rife's like early stuff, but as James Oshman points out in his book on energy medicine, he talks about the healing frequencies of mainly PMF being roughly 0 through 300 hertz. But if you look at the frequencies, a lot of the higher frequencies overlap with the 0 to 50. That's why I talk about 0 to 30 or 0 to 50, because those are the ones that correspond to the brain state frequencies. These are the frequencies the body is emitting from squid magnetometers. These are the frequencies of the earth that we're tuned into. And these are the frequencies the cells, Addy and Bowen and Siskin and Walker, the cells and tissues respond to. So yes, I don't think, and again, like I told you before the show, your synapses in your nerves, it's like a 10 millisecond type of a delay there. So you turn that around, that's 100 hertz. So whenever you go above 100 hertz, your nervous system can't really hear it. It's not going to really, or it's going to be, sometimes you can't go faster than that because your nerves can't just pick up on it. So and both red light therapy, interestingly, in red light therapy and PMF in the literature, I was a really good literature review of all the different PMF studies. It was one of those literature reviews of the PMF studies. So it wasn't just one study. It was going through all the different studies. And the whole basis of this paper, I don't know if it was Leiboff, I forget who did the paper. It was in Leiboff's book on a compendium of energy medicine studies. Very scientific, very well-researched book. Very dense too. It had like really a lot of dense stuff. He was one of the contributors to EMF. I forget who was the author, but the best parameters that they found was using like 2 to 3 to 100 hertz as a repetition rate. And we can talk about this if we want to take a deep dive into PMF. mean, again, this is stuff that a lot of people are not understanding because companies are just saying frequency and intensity. And they did talk about intensity using a lower. Now they went up to like 5 or 10 millitesla, but that's still way, way below what Tesla or those, like you mentioned Tesla coil. I had one of my social media worker was, because she didn't work for me exclusively. So she was also helping Tesla coil, right? Not Tesla coil, amp coil. And so she got an amp coil and sent it to me and I got to demo it out. And it's just, I don't like to badmouth PMF companies, but when they're cranking out not only high intensities like a Tesla or more, but they're using some of the higher frequencies, like some of the Rife. This is also called a Doug coil, by the way. The old-fashioned coils, which I didn't agree with either, were typically taking the Rife frequencies, Rife Bear, Hilda Clark frequencies, and putting them through a coil. So basically, amp coil, and there's another one that's a knockoff of it, are just glorified Doug coils that have a lot for like voice I mean, they got all this stuff where it listens to your voice, and it's like, it's not the overall effect is not going to be a whole lot different than the old-fashioned Doug coils, but the intensity is too high, and then they have you put and then it's only one coil, right? Mm-hmm. So this literature review of PMF studies showed that the ideal, and again, based on his most effective PMF studies, were showing lower intensities. Not maybe as low as I talk about in my book, because 5 millitesla is still a fair intensity. That's 5,000 Gauss. So some of the devices I like only go up to maybe 100 or 200 Gauss, or 300. With the probe went to goes to 300. But still, I see NARP studies with safety. 5,000 Gauss at low frequencies is still safe. So I just really, really loved that study because it just really drove home. And it was interesting that they capped off, getting kind of full circle when I started talking about this, is that 100 hertz was the cap of what they recommended for a repetition rate frequency, because that's the main frequency that interacts with the human brain and neurology. And this is why you want a repetition rate low at nighttime and maybe more energizing in the day, from 15. I mean, you could do gamma upwards to 50 hertz as a repetition, but that's to me a little overstimulating probably.
Wow. Well, that's a good segue, Bryant, because so PEMF, just to like kind of define it, it's both an electric field and a magnetic field, and pulsed means it's not static, right? It's going in and out.
I would like to call it PMF therapy, because it really, if you have a good coil that's tightly wound, pure copper, or you could use gold or silver, but it doesn't make any practical sense because copper is so good. And through the middle of that coil, which is going up into the body, you are getting a pure magnetic field. There's hardly any electric field going in the body at all. I mean, next to zero, really. So it's really more of a pure, because a pulsed electromagnetic field is you could say your light bulb, it really is it's a pulse, Maxwell's equations for light, it's got an electric field, a magnetic component, and that is a pulsed electromagnetic field. And so it's not that it's wrong to call PMF PMF. It's just because there's so little of the electric part of it, it's better to think of it this way. As if you remember the little experiments in high school where you take a little battery and you wrap a copper wire, and you create a little cheap electromagnet. It's not hard. You just take a copper wire, put it in 9-volt battery, put one terminal, wrap it around, and that's just a little cheap solenoid. So some of the probes, like the IMRS probe and the QRS probe, they're solenoids around a ferrous core, which just amplifies that. But let's just say they had a DC current going through that coil. It's called, it's a solenoid, right? It's just it's a spiral of a copper going up, very tightly wound spiral. And that, if you had a DC current going through it, you would get a pure magnetic field, no electric field coming out at all. And the energy of that is indistinguishable from a bar magnet with the North Pole at a similar intensity. Again, you got to make sure the direct current is enough to give you the same intensity. But you could not distinguish the two energies. If you put a shield over and you didn't know what was what, the biological effects are identical. So then it turns out magnets are due to spinning electrons. So at the molecular level, those magnetic fields are coming from electrons spinning in circles. So when we're doing in the coils, we're just doing that. We're reproducing what the electron is doing around an atom at a much, much higher level. And it's the same exact energy. But the beauty of PMF now, and the beauty of magnetic fields being so deeply penetrating, which is very, I mean, let me just mention that really quickly, because people will be like, well, what about electric field therapy, microcurrent therapy, and other ways you can get frequencies into the body? Well, the problem with those, even light therapy, even like red light therapy, which I love so much, is you have penetration depth, you have impedances. Impedance is just resistance in the skin from microcurrents, for example, like, zappers and TENS, EM, and all those FSM, frequency stimulation, all those types of frequency, whether they're electric currents or electric fields, you have dielectrics and resistances in your skin and tissues that block the input of that energy, especially if you're trying to work deep in the middle of your bone marrow, in the middle of your liver, in the middle of your heart. It's hard to get those energies that deep in the body, at least at a therapeutic dose. The beauty of PMF is, guess what? The constant for there is no impedance at all, or there's no dielectric for magnetic fields. Magnetic fields even go through lead, right? And I mean, they can make contraptions that kind of divert the magnetic field, but you can't it's like Faraday cage. They're kind of diverting it around. So because it's the magnetic field component on the deleterious or the harmful side of it, that magnetic field component is what's causing the damage in your tissue from electrosmog, because that's what's penetrating, unfortunately, deep. Not the electric field. It's pretty much most of the energy from those cell phone towers coming into your house are almost all magnetic field components of these things. But that on the healing side of it's a good thing, because now you can drive those frequencies deep in the tissue. And this is what makes magnetic field therapy and pulse magnetic field therapy unique, is that there's no other form of energy, provably by biophysics, which again, these biophysics textbooks talk about, the dielectric constant of the body is 50. In layman's terms, that electric fields are getting shielded by 50 times. That's 5,000% blocked. And even light, shine a flashlight through your hand, you do see the red part of the spectrum. So the biological window of light is really best around 600 to like 1,000. Well, the far infrared will go in deep, but as far as like the optical benefits of like working on the mitochondria and because the far infrared is heating water up, it's not doing much of heating the water in your body up, which is good. I mean, you can get easy water, you can get fourth phase of water from this type of. But if you want to work on the molecular level with mitochondria, like with red light therapy, you need to use slightly shorter frequencies. But that window. But a lot of other frequencies are just blocked out. Green and blue light, they don't go in at all. So this is something that people really need to understand, and that PMF is so unique in that sense of their energy medicine. I think that everybody, no matter how many energy medicine devices you have, this is where you start. Of course, we have a good air purifier, good shower filter, good water filtrate. I mean, those basic other things too. But when it comes to energy devices, I would start with PMF, and then maybe red light, and then maybe vibration and, infrared, the things. But
it is, because I'm really fascinated with sleep and creating like the ultimate sleep setup. And I've done so many experiments over the years. And I had Dean Bonley on the show a few years ago, and I was using his magnetic pad for years, and I don't anymore, just because I moved out of the city, so I feel like I don't really need that shielding effect. But magnetochelation is interesting. But there's a difference between static magnets and PEMF, and I know there are some companies. I think you mentioned one. I think Earth Pulse. Yeah, they sell like a sleep PEMF unit, right? That you're supposed to sleep on it. But I just kind of question: is that safe? And that seems to be a whole topic, right? Sleeping on static magnets versus pulsed.
Yeah, magnets to sleep on. Like what's that company that Jack Cruz, he's like an affiliate for? It's like
Magnetico. Mm-hmm.
Magnetico, yeah. So you're basically putting these it's really big, heavy box. You get this package, huge, heavy, really thick, strong magnets, and you're putting them. You're not putting them right on top. You're putting them further down. And I've got nothing against that. In fact, the nice way to do that would be to have, if you're going to really mimic the Earth, again, this is my whole thesis, right, is the Earth does have a quasi, it's not totally static, by the way. The geomagnetic field does have frequency, as HAARP math shows with they got 6 or 7 magnetometers, which measure very sensitive measurements for magnetic field. And they measure that the Earth magnetic field does have a frequency component to it. It's like, it's in the subhertz and the low hertz, like 0.1 to like 5, to 3, 4, or 5 hertz. But it's mainly peaks around 0.1 and 5.5 hertz. So So having a little bit of frequency, but again, that's almost, it's pretty close to being static. But 0.1 hertz is your breathing rate. That's about 10 repetitions a minute or so. Wait. See, it's 0.1 hertz is 10 cycles per second. I mean, 1 cycle per 10 seconds. So that would be, 6 cycles in a minute. So we breathe faster than that. But what HeartMath found was that this 0.1 hertz, when you are able to get somebody in a room with something that kind of gets them into this 0.1 entrainment, it seems to synchronize breathing, heart rate variability, and blood pressure. There's like a synchronization, a global coherence in your body that takes place at 0.1 hertz. And I think they did other experiments too, where they got people into coherence and they could see this 0.1. So it kind of goes both ways, right? I call this reciprocity. The frequencies that we get are kind of similar to the frequencies we emit. So when we're in a wonderful state of harmony within ourselves, we're like maybe in this 0.1 coherent state with our heart rate variability, our breathing rate, and our blood pressure. But also the earth is giving us that. So it goes both ways. So that, but why is it that we are why is it 0.1 hertz is such a harmonious, coherent state? It's because that's a fundamental frequency of the earth. So this is the whole thing. We've evolved, for millions of years as human beings, but certainly life for 3.5 billion years. So we've evolved to tune into and harness the energies that are on our planet. Our evolution, this is why life survives. It's like it learns, okay, here's our environment. We have these light frequencies coming in. We have this Schumann resonance. We have these electric field frequencies, these elements of food, water, air, etc. So biology is going to evolve to harness those energies to live. Because if we're on another planet that had all different Schumann resonance, because they'll have Jupiter's got a different Schumann, they'll all have different frequencies because of based on geometry and size. We would evolve totally different. We would need totally different frequencies, different foods, whatever. But again, life would have evolved to adapt to that environment. So this reciprocity idea was another big aha. I did a whole video on PEMF and reciprocity because Zimmerman showed that the frequencies we emit we're emitting that 0 to 30 hertz range in the magnetoencephalogram. It's like a squid magnetometer, very sensitively measuring the magnetic field of the body. By the way, up to 5 to 10 feet into space. It was back in 1963 that it was such this should be in every history book, by the way. Since 1963, where the first squid magnetometer detected the body's energy field outside the skin, this is when we first realized our body does not end at the skin. This is kind of a watershed moment. We're more than just physical beings. Because if I can detect your magnetic field like 5 feet, at the time it was maybe just a couple feet, and obviously you don't end at your skin. Your field is your biofield, or whatever you want to call it, or your aura. I like biofield better, so it's kind of scientifically accepted. But and by the way, this goes out to infinity because electromagnetic fields are 1/r², but there's no end to them. And the Pioneer 10 is a great example. It was like 7.6 billion miles from Earth when they got the last signal. Outside the solar system, right? It passed Pluto. And with a little 5 or 10 watt transmitter, we were able to pick up that signal on Earth. Think about that. That's like a 5 or 10 watt light bulb. Yes, we use maybe very big arrays of radio antennas to pick it up, but still, that shows you, when we go, it goes the other way too. So our energy is going, at least 7.6 billion miles or further into space, right? So that's huge. Because up until that moment, it seemed like all the electrocardiograms, electroencephalograms, you had to measure electrical current on the skin. Of course, a little bit of thinking would be like, well, Ampere's law says a current creates a magnetic field, but they never really would talk about these energies outside the body, that we have.
Yeah. Brian, have you ever heard of spaceweather.com, that website? It shows like solar flares and the solar wind speed.
Yeah. Cool.
What's going on and geomagnetic storms. And I know in like the spiritual communities, they always say, that if you're not sleeping well, it's because the sun's doing this. Have you ever gone down those rabbit holes?
Well, no, they're actually both really good book on biophysics. And I remember him talking about there's a scientific word for it, but it's basically a field that studies the biological effects of all these, perturbations from solar storms. And there definitely was a correlation between the big solar storms and psychiatric type of problems, just you sleep. I mean, yes, there is definitely a connection there. Really interesting. It's been a little while since I visited that topic, but when I read it, I'm like, it made perfect sense to me, because we're electromagnetic beings, and we're very highly sensitive and nonlinear. To give you a sense of how sensitive our body is. The Schumann resonance, which we know is essential, is only like 1 to 3 picotesla. I mean, it might go up to 10 picotesla. A picotesla is a trillionth of a Tesla. That's incredibly field, right? So we're talking about microteslas. Some high intensity companies are like, oh, microtesla's too weak. Well, picotesla is a lot weaker, and it's essential, and we're getting that from the Earth. So the fact that we can pick up even, there's one study that showed college students with they could shine 1 photon, and like half the college students were picking up or registering or detecting 1 photon in a dark room, which is like a millionfold. If you look at 1 photon registering in your brain, or it was a couple photons, but it was less than 10 for sure. I'm pretty sure it was 1 photon. And I had to re-look at it. It's like, oh, there's no way they can just pick up 1 photon. Maybe it was kind of a higher, I don't know if it was maybe a blue or more of a higher frequency photon, but that a millionfold amplification to get an electrical signal to your brain to register it. Because 1 little tiny photon's got very little energy, so that your neurons have to, that neural energy, that current that's got to go to register in your brain it's like a millionfold amplification. So this is why we don't need high intensity. Our body is highly nonlinear. We're not just machines where you get 1 input and it's twice the input, twice the output. Okay, triple the power, triple the output. That's not how we work. There's basically we follow more of a biphasic dose response pretty much with everything. Meaning it's the hormesis effect, right? It's basically I call it the Goldilocks principle. It's just a little, too little is not enough, and too much will hurt you. And again, sometimes the too much will have no effect, but then it goes below the x-axis and it gets into the negative. So, and this again, you can see this within fasting. You can see this within exercise. You can see this within red light therapy. You can see this within certain supplements. A lot of things where you get this little, like for example, with exercise, or even red light therapy, you get like a little burst of reactive oxygen species, right? And that strengthens your body's ability to cope with stress. Superoxide dismutase and glutathione, and some of these are all strengthened to handle, the oxygen radical, all those different peroxide radicals, whatever, catalase, all this stuff that's coming from reactive oxygen. And so, but if you go too far, like as Michael Hamlin showed with red light therapy, you get another spike of reactive oxygen, which is the bad one. And then that just keeps going down, right? So that's when you've gone too far. So there's like this Goldilocks zone with all these forms of therapies. And you can, when it's really weak now, when you use low intensity PEMF, you don't really have to worry about getting too much to the bad side of the hormesis curve, because there's just not enough intensity there that's going to really. But with high intensity, yes, you might get a little bit of hormesis effect with short, but nobody's really done that study. And some of the advice that some of these high intensity, I won't mention names just to be respectful, but some of these high intensity so-called PMF gurus that are just, and there's one in particular that's popular because he's got written 2 books. They're giving bad advice and telling people they can use high intensity for an hour a day even. And I know this because I had a guy that got crippled from following that advice. He was a race car driver right here in town. And so this is why I kind of get a little, kind of angry in a righteous way, because this is nothing against them personally. It's just their advice can be harmful. And until they get some good hormesis studies with high intensity PMF, maybe they have them. I haven't seen them or anything convincing. Then I think it's best to leave those for the clinical setting and short term. But if you want to use something every day and get the benefits of PMF, you want to do it every day, which you should. You want to definitely stick with lower intensity, lower frequency repetition rates. And I say repetition rate is the frequency of the pulse. You can't define a PMF device with one frequency unless it's just a sine wave free. Well, it's just a sine wave PMF, which to me, I don't like those because it's just too simplistic. You're not getting enough frequency. You're only getting one frequency. Now, some like the biotones will use like a couple, but then you're just still getting a couple frequencies and they're limited harmonics. That's not ideal, because you want that rapid rise and fall, which only comes from a broad spectrum of frequencies. In fact, you need some of the higher frequencies to get that sharp edge. And this just Fourier's mathematics, but we don't have to get too much into detail on that. But
so by intensity, are you talking about the Gauss?
Yeah, the microtest, but again, intensity is measured. Okay, so this is where one of these so-called high-intensity gurus misleads a lot of people, because he says that PMF signals fall with a 1/² drop-off, and but that's assuming an infinitesimally small point source. PMF coils are very large, so again, it's clear that he didn't study physics of how currents create magnetic fields, because you have to integrate over the source current. So when you do that, it's called the Biot-Savart law, or you can use Ampere's law too. But the Biot-Savart law is usually for a coil, it's easier calculation. You end up with, and I did the calculations based on, there's a popular book on PMF that actually shows like charts, right? Look, 2 inches away, it drops to this. And he shows you, it's like, if that was true, you would need high intensity, because based on his chart, hardly any energy was getting in from a low intensity device. But that was assuming, and I did the math. I spent like a couple days, of really digging into this, because so many people are getting misled by it, that I figured out, I don't know, I was like, where's his numbers coming from? Because at zero distance, he had a reading. It's like, well, at zero distance of a point particle, it would be infinity. Because 1/r², if r² is 0, and you put 1/0, what is that? It's infinity. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make any sense. So because he has to start with something at 0, I figured out he was using like a little 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter like sphere. And there's no PMF device that uses a 2 millimeter sphere. So his numbers were coming from some fictional sphere that's creating a 1/r² drop off. And even that wasn't accurate. It only worked for the first couple. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know where he got some of his numbers, because I went through this in a little video I did as a rebuttal. And only because so many people were coming to me saying, hey, high intensity you need high intensity because the low intensity won't penetrate. And the last straw was when Justin, and you said, Justin at Extreme Health, I did an interview with one of the high intensity guru people. Again, I'll just keep their names out of it. The person started to convince him that he needed high intensity, because he did a couple interviews with me earlier, right? When I saw that show, I called Justin. I'm like, Justin, we got to do another show. Just give me a chance to rebuttal. In fact, I said, Justin, I'll do one better. I'll send you an IMRS, a low intensity. You have a tri-field meter, which is good enough to measure the intensity. And I sent it to him. And if this guy, what he said was true, which is a 1/r² drop off, based on like this chart in the book that you would get absolutely no intensity, like just a couple inches off the mat even. It would be very, very minuscule. Right? But I got Justin, I guided him through this, and I said, like 3 feet above his IMRS mat, he was getting a pretty decent reading on his tri-field meter on the magnetic, right? So it totally contradicted what this guy was told him the high intensity guy told him on the show. Why? Because they're using the wrong. And the reason why this is the fundamental error of why people think they need high intensity. They're basing it on a couple gurus that say that you got a 1/r² drop off with magnetic fields. And because of that, you got to use high intensity to penetrate into tissue. That really is the reason. In a couple books written by this gentleman, you can go on Amazon and see who I'm talking.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Brian, because the other day I found, because I have goats and chickens, and I have my own little homestead here, and I was just searching around after we talked on PEMF devices, and just looking at what's for sale. I haven't looked in years too, and I found valleyvet.com. So they cater to equestrian horses and goats and sheep and stuff, livestock, and they sell a mini PEMF unit, but it's $9,000. And so I know, like for horses and stuff, they often use these really strong, kind of like the paddle kind of thing. Is that different, or would that, like what you said, would that still apply to horses and goats?
You might have a place in like Kentucky Derby races, like Terrell Owens. It's a big thing the high intensity companies love to talk about. Oh, how Terrell Owens got back to the field in the Super Bowl because of high, right? Well, it's because high intensity has a numbing and dumbing effect, like cortisone shots, where you can temporarily get some very good pain relief. And I'm not saying it doesn't have any immediate healing effects, because there are some really good reports. But the problem is when you look at like a couple studies, I forget the names of the researchers. It was like Blackburn or something, that over time you start to get tissue necrosis when you do high intensity over a prolonged period of time. So this is why I don't totally say that high intensity is absolutely useless. I do say that if in cases of professional athletes need to get back out in the field, that Kentucky Derby horses need to race, and doctors in a clinical setting that really understand how to use it properly, that understand the dosimetry, which a lot of even this so-called, who's a medical doctor and he's written 2 books on PMF, doesn't seem to understand dosimetry, and he's got a whole dosimetry section in his book about dosage. Dosimetry is just the science of dosage for the viewers out there, but it's a real big field of dosimetry, both in pharmacology and it's not talked about enough. And this is where the biphasic dose response curve comes. It happens in pharmacology too, and anything that deals with humans, because humans are nonlinear, so it's not going to be a straight line. Oh, double the pills equals double the benefit. You don't keep going like that. And
yeah.
But do I think that you need high intensity in any of these circumstances? Not really, just unless you want to use like an energetic cortisone shot to just dumb and dumb the. Again, do
they make low intensity? Because I've only seen like all the high intensity devices I've seen on the market have like the rings or the paddles, but I haven't seen any low intensity devices. They're all just mats. Have you seen any like low intensity with paddles and rings?
Again, the rings are just coils. So the coils, all the local applicators like IMRS, Beamer, they're using rings inside of the pads. It's now with the new IMRS Prime, they have they got rid of the probe. Now they have the hexagon spot, and it's a Helmholtz coil. It's actually just like the butterfly rings the high intensity uses, only it's more padded, so it's just a little more. It just looks better. It's more comfortable. But inside, it's no different than a butterfly ring. Assuming that you got and I'm sure they do this because it'd be dumb not to. You want the currents have to go in the same direction. You get the Helmholtz effect, meaning you don't get much of a drop off in between two. So it's good to use butterfly rings, but it's not good to use high intensity. Now, if you had them going in directions, then because I would see some people wrap like the Beamer, their Beamer pad around their knee, but then you got 2 coils that are pointing to different sides of the knees going in opposite directions. It's like pointing two poses at each other. The energy is just kind of, it's not, it'll go in but you're not getting that beautiful Helmholtz when you got it going the same direction. Mm-hmm. And actually, the new Centropics is mindful of that. So when you fold their mat, they got it all figured out so that you're always getting Helmholtz coil.
Interesting. Yeah. Another fascination of mine besides sleep is just driving and long. I used to drive, Uber and Lyft and cannabis in California and all this stuff, and just long car rides and road trips and moving cross country. And I was always trying to think of like things to stay energized. And about 6 months ago, I experimented with, I think it's Shore and Sealy is the brand, something like that. They sell like a little
Norman Sealy or
I think Sheely or something. Yeah, they sell like a little PEMF thing that you could put. Yeah, and I was using that when I drove around, and I don't know if I felt anything, but to me that felt like
But I think he's the one. Norman Shealy did a little stem cell research. He was finding like 3 to 4% increase of stem cells with his PMF device. How accurate that study is, but it makes sense. Endogenous stem cells, they become mobile when you can switch them from glycolysis to oxidative phosphorylation, which is the Krebs cycle. You're basically going from 4 miles or 4 miles per gallon to like 32 or 30 miles per gallon, or how many ATPs come out Krebs cycle? It's a lot more. It's like 36 or something. But so the stem cell, that's not a huge thing, and the mechanism makes sense to me because, and this is true with too, because you're switching, these cells that are doing anaerobic, very inefficient anaerobic respiration, and they're not really mobile in that environment in the bone marrow or wherever. It's very hypoxic. But then you use different ways to help them switch to oxidative phosphorylation. Then they can be more mobile. Then they'll come out more readily. They'll be able to come in the bloodstream and go to the tissue and heal whatever tissue needs to be healed. And really good research on that with red light. But when I saw that, Michael Hamlin talking about it, who's one of the big gurus in red light therapy, it made perfect sense why PMF would do the same thing, because PMF has been shown to interact with ATPase, which is the fifth complex in the Krebs cycle, the final transport chain. And that's the little rotor that's spinning around and pumping hydrogens out and really creating, the ATP from ADP or whatever. But so the PEMF is doing that, and the research shows that PEMF helps to create ATP and to release the energy from ATP. That it would, and this mechanism Michael Hamlin talked about is perfectly applicable to also PEMF therapy. But Norman Shealy, I don't know how he calculated his stem cell 3 to 4% increase, but I looked at his frequency and I couldn't understand why he was using such a high frequency. So it didn't make sense to me. I mean, as much as I respect him, he's got a great book on energy medicine. He's one of the more well-known authors on this book, Energy Medicine. But you can get IMRS or the old MRS 2000. You had a car adapter and beam. The Omnium One, which is also the same company as IMRS, has a tablet, and you can charge it, and it's wireless. The new Centropics is all wireless. You can get like, I think 15 or 20 sessions out of one charging. If I haven't noticed, I'm trusting that right now. I haven't noticed it's that many, but so not like on the road, I would make, because it's more of the low frequency. It makes more sense to me because, you just don't want to. You want to make sure you do the energy daytime session. You don't want to do the sleepy frequencies. Talk about this, but the repetition rate of these different PEMF devices, that's one of the biggest things that can help you with sleep. And our number two, when I'm not working with any PEMF company right now, but when I was, I would say the second most common benefit we would get from people was better sleep. I mean, my friend Lynette, she was having the worst insomnia. I mean, God, she was like my business partner for a while with Noble-Rex, this vibration plate, and she just couldn't get to bed. And I helped her to get an MRS 2000 at the time, and it took 2 weeks, because she had really, really bad insomnia. But then it was just like a switch got turned on. All of a sudden, she started sleeping better, and then she took it everywhere she went because she was afraid to leave home without it. She was getting like 3 hours of sleep a night, just really, really bad, and it was just really, really getting to her psychologically, even really, that really gets to you when you.
Yeah, I recently helped a friend with that. My friend Benny that lives here in Idaho next to me. He just had his second child, and just the stress, he just, he'd lay down to go to sleep and just be laying there all night with insomnia. And so I bought like SOTA devices. I think I got into them like, 8-9 years ago. So I gave him my SOTA biotuner. And that just, clips your earlobes. It's like the cranial electrical stimulation. And he said it seemed to help, but I made all these recommendations to him, magnesium and melt. He's like, he tried so many different things. But this electric thing seemed to help. So
still, all the PEMF devices, the IMRS or MRS 2000, which it used to be, it makes sense because the repetition rates, they do like the theta delta frequency repetition rate at night. And the more like 15.15 hertz is the repetition rate in the morning for the energy. Where Beamer is using like 10 and 30 hertz. And it's like, well, it's not terrible, but 30 hertz, well, that's a high beta. That's okay for the morning. But at nighttime, 10 hertz is relaxing. But, they have, and this is repetition rate. This is not the frequency of the device. People say, oh, you got high frequencies. And it's, measured on because we had to do rebuttals to different people that were saying, you got high frequencies. It's like, yeah, you need high frequencies to create a sharp slope. That's how you get reduction, right? So it's kind of, but the repetition rate is that this is what the nervous system is responding to, and this is what the study of studies showed, is that you want, because of the neurological, connection to the repetition rate, you want to keep frequencies below that threshold of 100 hertz, which is faster than the neurons can register in. So it makes sense. That's kind of what our brain states aren't going to 100, but we're certainly going from at least 0 to 50, or maybe with gamma. I don't know how high gamma goes, but it goes up. Right.
I didn't tell you this in our phone conversations, but it was 2 years in the making, and I built a bathtub made out of lodestones. And apparently the first magnets in the world were made of lodestone. There's like a good William Gilbert wrote a book called De Magnete and he focused on, it's a form of iron oxide, which is interesting. But it's magnetite. It's been struck by lightning, and so it creates a permanent. And I have a bunch of different magnetic meters. I have like 3 10 Mars, and I just got a new one that's like omnidirectional, and it pulses anywhere between, I don't know, I guess 1 hertz, and I've seen it pulse all the way up to like 180.
Oh, wow.
Or I'm sorry, Gauss. Yeah, I think I said hertz, but yeah, it pulses with that strength of Gauss, and it's like, I think it's close to 1,000 pounds in there. And so I'll fill it with water and put like Shilajit and my goat milk in there, like Cleopatra, and she used donkey milk, but and just try to
Faraday, I think, or something.
Yeah.
And they supposedly they use lodestones to heal, grease or whatever, and they would sometimes move the lodestones. They find that sometimes they get better benefit shaking or moving them. Again, when you get more of an induction, that's where you get the PEMF. So that's the problem with static magnets, is that in order to create a microcurrent, it's Faraday's law. You need to change your magnetic field with time. A static oscilloscope is a straight line. There's no dynamic change. But they do have an effect because relative to the field, all your ions and blood is moving. So, but if they weren't, then there would be no effect at all from magnet. But because all your little circulating stuff is moving around, you kind of get a relative induction through that. And so this is why you have to use higher intensity with magnets to get an effect, because the movements are so weak compared to like a good PMF that can get a really sharp induction and create those microcurrents. But it's certainly, I don't see anything wrong with doing that, what you're doing.
Do you think the H2O molecules in the water, because it's like, I don't know, 150 gallons of water, like the magnetic field moving through the water with the minerals would change anything too?
The Navy did a study with like using magnets inside of pipes, and they found that you get less buildup when you use magnets because you're lowering the tension. The deposit happens at a higher surface tension, which just simply means when you lower the surface tension, solutes can be dissolved more easily. At higher surface tension, they fall out of solution, right? So they'll deposit on the pipes. So the lower surface tension makes the water wetter, and of course it'll penetrate into your skin better, and or it'll clean at a deeper level. This is why soaps don't work to clean your clothes. All that soaps do is they lower they're surfactants that lower surface tension. And in fact, like Flanagan, God rest his soul, God bless his soul, some of his stuff with lower surface tension was essentially like a soap, but it was a very much more bioavailable, where it didn't have the side effects of just drinking soap. Same thing with Willard water too. Willard water is basically liquid soap, but in a sense, because it's doing the same thing as soap. And in fact, if you shake up Willard water with your water in a bottle, it would get all bubbly, like soap bubbles. But it was not, you don't want to be drinking soap, obviously. So you just find ways with the little silica molecules. Flanagan, I forget exactly how he did it, but you can lower the surface tension of water in ways where whatever you're using to do that, like Willard water, is not harmful to the body so much. It's just, but then like Edward Loren would say, and I learned so much about water from him, do you really want the surface tension to be that low? That kind of leaves you with weak, lazy water. So it's like everything is just, so I kind of got away from trying to lower the surface tension in my water, which electrolysis device, ionizers will do that too, but that's not necessarily a good thing if you lower the surface tension too much. Yeah,
you brought up Patrick Flanagan, and I told you I went to his like neo neurophone party before he passed, and I'd been using the NF3 for years. I think I bought it like, I don't know, 7 years ago or something. And what fascinated me was the ultrasound delivery right to the brain. Oh, and he had some pretty wild claims on like, speed learning languages and, improving short and long-term memory. And maybe it did do all those things, but there was some pretty wild claims in the interviews that he made on it. But then I heard Gerald Pollack, the water expert, say that infrared light and ultrasound create easy water, exclusion zone water. So that kind of connected the dots to me, because I still have that little ultrasound device, just 2 transducers you put on your head. I can't remember what the frequency of it was, but I think it was pretty high of ultrasound. But it definitely worked. I mean, I've seen it melt headaches and all sorts of stuff. Infrared, it's near, Dr. Pollack found that it was 1,200 nanometers. So that was like the peak of the easy water production. But certainly visible light, this is another basis for light therapy, is that it creates easy, even just regular visible light, if you shine on water, it'll start to create this easy water. And, but you get the peak of production at the 1,200, around 1,200. But certainly far infrared saunas, you're going to get it there too. And again,
think about it. We've evolved on this planet, and I forgot to mention this, to harness the energies, not just the energies from the sun, because the sun is giving us pretty much UV, visible, and infrared, right? That's almost all we're not getting much radio and gamma rays and all that because the atmosphere filters that out. However, the sunlight that hits the earth, all that energy is utilized for life, and then life kind of, you could say, excretes. It's kind of the waste product of waste heat. The same thing with waste heat. So the frequencies coming in, the wavelengths going out is going to be a lower wavelength or a longer wavelength because it's less energy going out, or more incoherent energy. Same energy, but it's longer wavelengths. So we have all this infrared radiation re-radiated from the earth. And so we're basically like with infrared camera, this is why infrared cameras work at night. So we're constantly saturated by infrared radiation coming re-radiated from the earth. That's coming from the sun, warming the earth, and the earth is absorbing. Now some light's reflected, like if you go skiing, you're going to get pure reflected light, but just this re-radiated light is what creates the easy water. So life has learned, with water, because water is a battery. But it's got to be near a hydrophilic surface. It doesn't work unless you have, which by the way, our blood vessels, connective tissue matrix is a hydrophilic surface, right? So you can create water. And this is a mechanism for another mechanism for why, say, red light therapy works, is that it's creating easy water. And by the way, when you create easy water near the hydrophilic surface, in the middle of that, it's a tube like blood vessels. In the middle now you have the exclusions zone of water, so it's pushing out. But there's a lot lower surface tension. It lowers the surface tension of the water in the middle. So like with the ATP as a little rotor, they found that when you shine, like they did a study with 980 nanometers, and it lowered the surface tension of that water and increased ATP. That's the mechanism that they found that was going on. So the 980 wasn't working on cytochrome C like the other proven red light frequencies. It was working on water, just as Jerry Pollack talks about. And his book, The Fourth Phase of Water, I spent a lot of time going through that, and it's something everybody should, May Wan Ho too has got a really great book on water, and she references Jerry Pollack in the book. And it's just such an important, people just don't get that water is just not water. People just think that water is just some bulk thing, it's like, but if you look at all the different ways you can measure water, from surface tension to solids, in one of my videos I did on water, I just showed there's like 50 different parameters. Yeah. It's just, there's so much to water, and Dr. Emoto and all this stuff. That you program frequencies into water. Water creates these hydration envelopes, and it's just so many. It's such a vast topic of, and as Jerry Pollack says, I think he said, what did he say, 98.3 molecules out of 100 in your body are water. It's very precise. Now, by bulk percentage or weight, it's maybe 70% or whatever. But by molecular count, because water is so small, it's 98.3 out of 100. So we better get that right. This is something we're, at least physically, at the physical level, this is like a bulk of who we are is water. At least of the body, right? But that water is it's like a liquid crystal. It's this very highly superconducting, and there might be some quasi superconduct, not pure super, but this is where quantum effects can probably happen at the higher temperature scales, is that you got this very coherent phase of water. And that was May Wan Ho's thesis. She's like, biophysicists would say, quantum coherence or quantum effects can't happen in the body. It's such a hot, messy place with too much going on, which kind of makes sense with traditional decoherence and models of quantum mechanics. But with the water, you got something that's very special. It's a macroscopic quantum phenomena, I think. And I think May Wan Ho's right. I think really water is the center player for these quantum effects, which like the amplification of weak signals and all these non-linear effects of the body, I think come from the quantum biology of the human organism. We're not a Newtonian machine. We don't follow Newtonian physics. And we don't even really just follow, chaos theory and nonlinear classical physics. That's still classical physics. No, we are more quantum beings, and I won't get too much into quantum mechanics, but it's a really fun topic to discuss, if we can truly get in a quantum coherent state, perhaps that is kind of what enlightenment is, like when you're fully in a quantum coherent state, because there is no inside and out, there is no separate individual anymore, because you're in that entangled state with everything. You're just one, you're truly one with everything. And to me, that's like the ultimate goal, right? All these things that we're doing for our health and it's all great to extend our lifespan, but ultimately we want to really know and realize, who we are. And I think the cool thing about energy medicine, it's kind of a nice transition from just the purely physical understandings. And then it's opening people's minds to that, hey, we're more than a physical body. We're an energetic body. It's very measurably so. So maybe there's even more beyond the energy body, which you could say is the etheric or possibly the astral body sort of coming, the subtle body. But there's even more subtle. So it's just opening people up to these, even like the chakras. Valerie Hunt did a study at UCLA with sound giving good evidence for the existence of the chakras with her sound study. And I shared this little video clip. It's a really cool video clip. You can Google it. UCLA. So anybody that thinks they're just a physical body, they're not up to date on current science. I mean, maybe before 1900, maybe that was the science they had back then. The classical Newtonian paradigm, but that got shattered with quantum mechanics and relativity, just absolutely obliterated. Not shattered. I mean, just totally obliterated that idea of the universe, some physical thing that's outside of us.
Yeah.
And, some physical objective thing, right? We look so real. That's why it's so convincing. Yeah. Anyway, not to get a tangent here.
No, that was great. Yeah. When I was in San Diego, Southern California for 30 years, and I used to go to all these different meetups. And once I experienced Reiki, which 90% of the time I didn't feel it, but the 10% of the time I did feel it, it felt like a PEMF device. Their hand felt like a PEMF device in my hand, out of my head. And then I did Deekshas, and I felt that 100% of the time. That felt like electricity going through their fingertips into my brain. So.
Practitioner, because I didn't tell you the Zimmerman study that used a very sensitive magnetometer. They were finding they actually used Reiki healer in their study, and the Seto in Japan repeated the study with Qigong kind of masters. But both a true Reiki healer that's very good at what they do and a Qigong master, they're both able to really radiate a strong energy. But not all of them have the same levels of energy, obviously. So how much you feel is dependent on the chi or how much energy that practitioner has. But they were finding that this is where they were measuring, like coming out of their hands. It was actually a pure magnetic field. It was like a pulsating magnetic field coming out of their hands, literally a PMF. That was basically going between 0 to 30 hertz, and it was peaked around 7 to 8 hertz, which to me I was like, oh wow, that's Schumann resonance. So they're literally almost like channeling these energies of Earth, because again, we're part of the global Mother Nature. We're part of a much larger. Again, the physical body, our little tiny physical body, is just one aspect of our. Our truest self is pretty much the whole universe. I mean, ultimately, the cosmic consciousness experiences show that. A lot of great saints and sages have kind of experienced and reported the same thing, that you have this experience of being just everything, kind of this oneness with everything. And it's not just feeling one with everything, it's literally just expanding to being everything. I mean, it almost gets hard for the rational mind to even comprehend or believe, for that matter. But yet you get these reports from all these experiences in cosmic consciousness from around the globe throughout the millennia, right? From over many generations, going back to the Buddha and before the Buddha, even into the Vedas. And but those Reiki healers, they were that is a pure pulse magnetic field. So the fact that you reported it feeling the same, that's what the Zimmerman study showed. It is the same. But don't get me wrong, there is behind that, because physical instruments can't measure like consciousness and some of the very subtle aspects of consciousness. But certainly at a gross energy level, it is the same as PMF. But you understand there's an intent too, so they're also putting their positive intention, things that can't be measured.
Yeah. I wonder how like vitamins, minerals, and enzymes play into like the people having those abilities, because I know it's all connected and it all matters. And maybe that's why I didn't feel it 90% of the time with Reiki healers, because they're eating McDonald's or soy burgers or whatever it is. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, no, true. It's like I spent a lot of time studying the lives of all these mystics and enlightened beings, and to me, and you can kind of tell. And I've been with some, that are alive now, and you can kind of, when you're with them, you can really feel their love. It's very tangible if you're sensitive enough to feel it. But but some of them will go for long periods of time, hardly eating anything at all. So they were just, I think when you're at a certain level, you can just create, all that stuff is just automatically created in your body, you know, like these great beings, they can just manifest an apple or whatever. They can just, they're just totally, because ultimately the thing is in a way like a big dream, we're in a long dream version of this reality that we think is this we call life. It's just it's not much different than your dreams at night. It's just a much longer dream and a much more vivid dream. But yet the fact that consciousness is creating reality, like quantum mechanics says, it's the same thing. That's what's happening when we sleep at night. But it's also happening when we look out in this world. We're creating reality. When we wake up in the morning, we're literally creating the whole universe. Every morning we wake up. And I can say this with confidence because this is what quantum mechanics is pointing to. Because before a conscious observer, all you have is these. Now, again, granted, at the physical macro level, the wave functions are kind of locked into place, but they're still vibrating, and there's still nothing really there. It's just the Schrodinger's waves are all, because of mass and complexity. There's those two things, mass and complexity. You get these wave functions kind of just vibrating. So that way, we all see a consensus reality. That's why we're at night. It's almost like we're in God's dream now, in a way. We use whatever we want. God is much better at visualizing and creating details than we are. I mean, almost infinitely so, right? But every night when we go to that image, if you want to believe that, then we're doing the same thing at night. And people that are really good at lucid dreaming, I had one friend and she became enlightened. She was able just to create her dreams at night, and she thought everybody else could do it, but she didn't realize she's just an old soul, right? On the verge. But if you really, and it's not something I'm not going to pretend to be good at this at all. I'm not. But it's something that when you just take it as a theory, when you're doing a similar thing at night when you sleep, and it's just a much shorter dream. And when you wake up, we're in a bigger dream. I mean, but what quantum mechanics is really, it just shakes the foundations of what we think is a physical objective reality. And in a way, it sounds like pure solipsism. In a way, it kind of is. It's just that we're not the only ones. I mean, what the consciousness that's creating the reality is more of a universal consciousness. It's not like a little tiny ego consciousness in this body. So that kind of the solipsism side of it. And this all relates to energy medicine too, because the placebo effect, or medicine and holistic healing in general, the placebo effect is the biggest discovery in the history of medicine, and it's something that the doctors don't like, because people can just be healed like that, right?
Yeah, well, that's where the practical thing of lucid dreaming comes in for me, because I used to journal back. I started when I was 11 or 12 years old. I started a TXT file on my PC, and I recorded, I think, over like 100 dreams, but maybe 10% of them were lucid. And to me, the practical application of lucid dreaming, besides just people stroking their ego that they can do it, which I've seen that multiple times, is that it's direct access to trauma that you've had. And I did that time and time again, where I can access the exact frequency or energy of the stuck energy from whatever I experienced and neutralize it. And then I wake up and I'm a different person. I've had that happen multiple times in lucid dreams.
Something that dreams will show us is all this unresolved things will come up in our dreams. And that's actually part of shadow work, is dream journaling. And I won't pretend to do it as much as you did, but one of the things that I like about dreams, just from a consciousness point of view, is just pondering the who am I question, because you really go deep into who am I in this physical body, because it's just easier we're more alert and conscious in this physical body as a general rule of thumb. I mean, as we get better at lucid dreaming, yes, we can, in our subtle body, we can become more and more conscious there too. Like you're probably had those glimpses, but then you can say, okay, at night, the dream also seems like a really dream world, and it seems so real. And you forget that you're this physical body in this world before you wake up, that is. You're in this dream world. And it's like you think you're that body in that dream world, and it really seems real that all these people are around you, and they all kind of seem separate from you, right? But when you wake up in the morning, it's that all was in your head. So this is why even you and I are all connected in consciousness. You're not other than me. In fact, I'm creating you and you're creating me, but it's all just the one consciousness. But we only have our perspective, so we just have to start who am I within. But once we get to that highest sahaja samadhi state, then we really see the whole non-duality. It's a non-duality of everything. Quantum mechanics point. Actually, this is why people don't understand quantum mechanics, because a lot of scientists are so hard-headed with their realism philosophies and their objective reality that they just cherish so much, that we're these bodies and this is a real reality outside of these bodies. They can't see that non-duality is being, that quantum mechanics is basically pointing directly to non-duality. And that's becoming more, some of the non-dual, teachings are getting into some of these top quantum physicists now, because it does make it all make a lot more sense. And I spent a lot of time in this area, and it's
interesting because I was raised Christian and I went back and forth, just like I did with vegetarian veganism multiple times, and a few times. And the argument I've heard against lucid dreaming from staunch Christians is, and they say like crystals are evil and meditation's evil and yoga's evil and all this stuff. But they've said in lucid dreams, like one of them had a testimonial that he got so good at lucid dreaming every single night that one night he had like a reptile being, like a humanoid reptilian, look at him with his third eye and then sucked him in to his third eye. And it was a very like demonic, dark experience. And he like called out for Jesus and he was saved or whatever. But I find those stories interesting because, it kind of goes back to like the extraterrestrial thing. Like Stephen Greer says they're all good, which I don't agree with. And then you have like Linda Bolton Howe and other people that, share the other side of the story, which I don't know.
Both. There's talks about some inside government people talking about like 40 different alien species that the government had contact with. And I don't doubt that. I mean, maybe it's a number, but I'm sure it's more than just a couple. And but there's good and bad. I mean, you got the great, perhaps the billions, whatever, that are on the kind of the side that's not really doing much good. Like that's probably like a reptilian in that sense. And then you have, a lot of the play different type, who knows? But I mean,
right.
Then you got then more, even like our elder brothers, our more advanced elder brothers that are overseeing our evolution, that are the good, they're always for good, but they don't want to interfere in our free will. And it's this whole, it's God's Leela, right? Even though it's not really free will, it seems like we have free will, but it's this beautiful Leela of God. So God doesn't want, if just Jesus came down in a cloud and just, everybody would, we're not really making the decision to be good by just, and it made sense. I remember reading Yogananda talks about in one of his books, that if a planet is God gets rid of a planet, it becomes either all good or all evil. Because if it's all good, you're born into this planet and everybody's an angel. It's like, what challenge is that? It's like, of course you're going to be an angel, right? You're pretty much almost, there's just no choice hardly. You're just choosing. It's just what's there. That's all. Or all evil, it's just the other way. Obviously the all good is a better option, but I thought that was interesting. If all good, and I kind of thought about that. And it's like, I don't know again, but it makes sense, right? The whole experiment of free will and consciousness and this great Leela of again, you don't have to use the word God. You can say, Brahman, Allah, Tao, whatever word, source, consciousness, the self, Atma. All kinds of words, but they're not. But the words aren't it. The words are just pointing to what can't be described in words. But the lucid dreaming is kind of more on the astral plane. So this we have an astral body that we're in our dream state, right? So it seems like our sense of self kind of jumps from one body, or our ego, it's not our true self, but our ego self jumps from one body to another. So we identify with the physical body when we're awake. We identify with the astral body when we're dreaming. Then we identify with the causal body when we're in deep sleep. But during that state, which is just and there's just no thoughts at all, there's no dream, it's just pure consciousness. We typically don't stay conscious during that state, although the masters can stay conscious during all states, and it's just the one certain point. But as we meditate and as we get to get more in tune with this consciousness, we do get more to where we can stay. We know the true self. That's why I like dreams, because when I think of, okay, I was dreaming last night, and it's like, who am I? Who was that? Because it seems like it's different than this person here, right? Like this is getting off topic, but it's really fast. This adventure of consciousness that we're on it's just so fascinating. That's why I meditate every day, and I really make that a priority, because it's just getting to really know who you are. That's it's a lot simpler than some of these complicated meditation techniques make it out to be.
I love it. Yeah, my friend John recently got me into just simply walking after a meal because I've been bringing it back to basics because it supports digestion and just glucose uptake into the muscle and all sorts of stuff. And so just a simple 10-minute walk after a meal, and I don't listen to music. I just walk and look out for grizzly bears. And that's been a great practice for me. So,
it is a great, ultimately meditating with the eyes open really is, the goal is to be in a constant state of meditation, but in a sense where you are just pure consciousness, sort of, there is no inside and out. That's the highest state, right? Sahaja samadhi, where there's no longer any, even nerve recall samadhi, where people go in these trances and they go into all these states of ecstasy. They come out and the ego is still there, right? So as long as you think you're a separate individual, you're really not there yet. That's why I have to be humble, because Bryant still seems like he's still rattling around in there. And but ultimately, I mean, in theory, I know that it's an illusion that I'm some separate individual. And all the great masters say, when they have this ultimate enlightenment realization of this true sahaja enlightenment, not just a spiritual experience, but the true final enlightenment, they look back and they realize the ego never was all along. It's like, it's not that the ego dies. It's just the ego never was. It was and it's recognized very clearly. And now, again, one of my friends, went through this process. So I don't have many friends that have been enlightened like this, but she's one of them. And she had like the question, who am I? She did whatever practice she was doing, but it was like, it kind of seems to always happen. Like you get to the state where it's almost a spontaneous, who am I? Even if you're worshiping God, right? Ultimately, that's still duality. So the who am I brings it back to the source of your true self, which is, of course, one with everything. And she had final, and she woke up in the morning and told her husband, Sir, he was also my really good friend, William. She's like, she told him, it's like, something's different here. She was like, something's really different. And she just, really, the whole perception of reality. But to me, that was the big interesting thing, was that she realized that this has always been like this. It's like, and in quantum mechanics, I won't get into it today, but maybe another time we could talk about this. But quantum mechanics points to this too, and that's the true, this collapse of the wave function is an illusion. That takes our self-referential, like I or ego self, to collapse the wave function. The wave function of the universe, or conscious, I mean, it's totally the whole unit. There is no, every little separate part, it's called a mixed state in quantum mechanics, where you're observing a certain part, it's still entangled with a larger state. And so even when you're looking under a microscope and you think you collapse the wave function, well, you're entangled with the microscope, and then you and the microscope are entangled with your surroundings. And it's an illusion to say that this looks like physical, I'm here, the unit, everything else is out there. But in the ultimate quantum mechanics, that's an illusion. The wave function of the universe is the truest pure state, because you can always convert a mixed state to a pure state, which is just a pure oneness state of entanglement, by simply going to a larger scale. Because at some larger level, you're always going to be entangled with a larger thing, right? And it's the illusion of duality that just keeps us so locked in this ego. And we really think that, but quantum mechanics, this is why it's so hard to understand, is pointing to something beyond that duality, something that, is, and I've wrote some articles on this. It's a really fascinating topic, how spirituality and quantum mechanics are saying the same thing, at least the non-dual parts, not dogmatic spirituality in any sense, or even a lot of the new age spirituality. I'm talking about like the real pure non-dual of certain Buddhism, certain Vedanta, the Advaita Vedanta type of teachers, and that pure, there's no different gods or goddesses and all that stuff. That's not real. It's just all part of the astral plane in the college. But just the pure, above all that, is just pure non-dual consciousness, pure existence, pure bliss, and that really is our truest self. And I just find it so fascinating that the non-duality is not only hinted at with quantum mechanics, but you really you're almost forced to take it on if you really want quantum mechanics to make sense. Mm. I could talk about. I don't want to keep this on a spirit.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of Q&A questions. I was thinking we could start going, because I'm sure there'll be some offshoots from some of these. Good.
Yeah.
No, that was great. We'll kick it off with a bang here. Can PEMF treat cancer or diseases?
I mean, that's just putting me. The on the coronavirus and PMF, and the FTC came after me, and my warning letter still. And I even say that I didn't even say PMF cures coronavirus. I said PMF helps the body to fight coronavirus, and it actually does. In fact, I used it when I got it. Worked very, very well. But I don't want to get into corona. I just think I got to be careful what I say about the whole COVID thing. But with cancer, it's a similar boat. You can't say that PMF cures cancer or treat. You can't even say it treats cancer. But we have a lot of cancer testimonials. Just report news, right? I'm not saying it does. This is what report to me, and there is good research to show that PMF helps the body to fight cancer. In fact, I wish I could remember some of the names of these scientists. It's been about a little over a year since I really looked at it. But we created a little cancer packet, and we wouldn't put it online, of course. We're not going to put a target on our back. But we would give it to customers that really had a loved one, or maybe they had cancer themselves. And it was just a packet of all kinds of research and reasons why PMF helps the body. Again, it helps the body to heal itself, So as Dr. Jerry Tennant's Body Healing is Voltage, I do agree with his fundamental idea that, when you get the voltage of the cell gets below a certain threshold, it's just basically the lowest rung of cellular voltage. This is where cancers happen because of that lower cellular voltage, you now are reverting to fermentation cycle glycolysis, which not only produces 4 ATP, very hypoxic, but it also creates a lot of acidic waste products. So the whole acidic, so alkalizing the body is actually the same as energizing the voltage of the cells, because when a higher voltage is a higher pH. A pH meter is like a voltmeter in a sense. So the fundamental reasons, I think, if we just go down to the cellular level, we can stay out of trouble with making curative type of claims, right? Mm-hmm. If we can raise cellular voltage, which again, there's many mechanisms through the transmembrane potential that PMF does this, that we can then bring the cells out of that glycolysis pathway into oxidative phosphorylation, start creating more ATP, start utilizing more oxygen, bringing in more oxygen. So that's another big thing. Cancer, and this too, cancer loves low oxygen, toxic environments. They love acidity, an acidic environment. They love sugar, if you put a lot of sugar in your bloodstream. And of course, stress breaks the body down. And, but I would say it's the low voltage, and they thrive in a low voltage, a low energy environment. So when you start to increase the voltage of the cells, it's interesting. The human cells can handle voltage. Cancer cells aren't good at handling this energy and voltage. So what happens, and this is one doctor, I forget his name, but he found that when you apply PMF, the cancer cells would just start to, instead of dividing into more cancer cells, they just started expanding, and you get like apoptosis process where it just, cell lysis. And it was, and we cited some of the research in our packet. So there's very good evidence. Again, we can't say it treats cancer. We can't say it cures cancer, but we can say that it increases cellular voltage. It increases, immunity naturally. It increases detoxification. And it basically helps the body to fight cancer. It basically helps the body to heal itself. And again, it helps to reverse, and poor circulation too. So I had to take out angiogenesis from my first copy of my book. I had to change it because some cancer patients were like up in arms. It's like, I can't do PMF. It's angiogenesis. It's like, well, you don't understand. Like red light therapy. This is why they call red light therapy now biomodulation, because or photobiomodulation, is that it modulates, it brings down the body is very intelligent. So when you give the body energy, it will bring down things that are maybe, like say too much inflammation brings it down. Poor circulation, like on a thermal imaging scan, you can see like red. If you got inflammation, it brings it down to green. If you're in the blue, bad circulation, it brings it up to green. So it's bringing both down and up, which drugs can't do this. Drugs are always going in one direction. They're either fighting inflammation or they're doing something like a blue pill, increasing microcirculation, nitroglyceride, or that's what Viagra was originally, a heart patient or heart disease, right? But they found that it had all these other things that people ended up marketing it for that. So it's the cancer also is but you want angiogenesis in the parts of the body that have bad circulation, like diabetics. They got terrible circulation in their legs, so they want. But what PEMF is not going to increase the angiogenesis for cancer, right? But this circulation of getting oxygen in and waste products out is a big part of how PEMF works for cancer too. Again, you're getting oxygen, nutrients in, all the waste products out. You're increasing cellular voltage. You're increasing alkalinity. And of course, you got to watch your diet to make sure you're not getting too much sugar. That's something PEMF's not going to help you with. If you're eating too much sugar, that's going to be problematic no matter what you do. But
yeah, it's my understanding that just increases like copper requirements because you need copper to metabolize glucose and all these things. But it's good, better, best. I mean, you can get like coconut nectar, and there's better ways to do like even if you're not a raw vegan, I do still think raw vegans make the best desserts when they really purest ingredient, and they use like the coconut like nectar as a sweetener. Honey, there's debates over that. But most sweeteners aren't that great. As you probably know. So, and certainly the commercial sugar, which is in most commercial foods, people are eating too much. That's unfortunately too many people are doing that, and they're feeding the cancer by doing all that. But again, if you're doing the more towards nature you get with it. But even there, you got to watch like fructose, and you got to watch. You can certainly overdo fruit. You don't want to do too much fruit, obviously. If you got to be careful with. But again, if you're with whole foods, that's always going to be better than the artificial refined sugars that are. But diet's a big part of reversing cancer, though, too. So that's beyond the scope of this book, this talk. And I'm not really that's not my area of expertise, really. Even though I did nutritional counseling, it's not. Yeah. One of my guests, Adam Bergstrom, said he's seen spirulina help with a lot of cancer, and you can buy like fresh spirulina now, where they ship it to you just freshly harvested, and then you just freeze it, and then so that way there's more enzymes and stuff. Yeah.
E3 Live blue green algae. I think they started doing spirulina, or there's companies that do the spirulina now. No, I got some of that stuff. Yeah, I remember getting some of that.
Yeah, I love the taste of algae, spirulina especially. But
I used to make a meal out of chlorella and spirulina sometimes. But again, chlorella, you got to watch a little bit. Make sure it's harvested properly, so you're not getting any heavy metals or anything. But spirulina, I can see that the phycocyanin in spirulina, like blue pigment, I can see that having really powerful, immune enhancing properties. And
let me see. Someone asked a good one. How is this different from scalar technology? It's kind of a big question.
This is, again, I have to, just confess, I actually system. I spent $72,000 for it, and I met Sandra and Michael. Michael installed it. And I got to know them actually because we had a whole center here, and they're basically these. They look like just like computer screens that are facing each other, and they just have it almost looks like just gibberish just scrolling up and down the screen, and they face them. And I had 12 of these in my bedroom, right? Because like you, I had just I'm not as I used to be, but I had my house was just a laboratory of gadgets everywhere. So, but does that, to me, that's more of a photon collider. And my friend Chris Kaufman creates his synchronicity systems, pretty much the same thing. That's really doing something, but I don't think it's a scalar wave generator because scalar waves, you have to, you're basically creating two electromagnetic waves and you're getting them perfectly out of phase so that there's basically no detectable field there, but there's still information. There's still something's there though. And it's like turning one coil in one direction, the other coil in the other, right? The energies are going out and just kind of flattening out. But my friend Vladen, he actually got two multi-wave oscillator coils, and he was trying to create a pure scalar, because that's what you got to do. If you're going to create a scalar wave, you have to have two opposing energies that both cancel each other out. So the EE system, yes, it was basically using photons, but you can't. How are you going to cancel out a terahertz frequency? They would have to be synchronized so perfect, and they weren't synchronized perfectly, by the way. And I know because I owned them. Now, all the other scalar wave pendants, and there's all kinds of scalar wave. I had the scalar wave laser. It was not scalar wave. You just can't. A scalar wave, you almost need two opposing sources of energy to flatten it out. Again, this is just based on just Maxwell's equations and there might be other, don't get me wrong, there might be ways to create scalar waves that I don't understand. I mean, I'm not saying it's possible, but I remember the pendant was a big thing. I mean, they're just throwing around scalar wave. Oh yeah, scalar wave this, scalar wave that. It's just like quantum, right? Oh yeah, this is a quantum this is a quantum that.
Do you think it's safe, Bryant, to like watch out for, passive EMF devices for like non-powered? I'm always just skeptical if you don't have to plug it in and charge it.
Yeah.
I'm more skeptical that it's doing something versus if you have to charge it, it's might have more.
Well, the thing there is you can make the case for that. You can make the opposite argument too. It's like if there's no energy, electricity going into it. And again, a static magnet's a little different, but remember, static now they are just moving charges going around. And let's see, all good EMF devices. And I had this. I won't mention his name. I'm trying to be respectful. But one of the companies went over to a guy that has this mineral company, and he was doing all these electrosmog tests on, and said, "Oh, IMRS has electrosmog. Beamer's got electrosmog, but EMPS doesn't have electrosmog." Then so I got the same meter, repeated the same test, and of course, what he's saying was not true because he was measuring with and again, I got the very sensitive meter too. The energy was getting stronger as he was going away from the source. It's like that's not possible. You're obviously got other stray electrons going on in the room, and you're not doing a really good, careful experiment. So I didn't get any electrosmog on any of them. So low intensity, this is another thing. High intensity PEMF, yes. My friend Richie Campanella had like the older generation of the pulse centers, right? I think it was MG30 for the magnet. And he put it in his closet. He was just using he's doing something different now, but at the time he was doing the MRS 2000, and he just because he was sitting next to people working with the magnet charger all day long, and all the electrosmog was just bombarding him. Because when you're dealing with those voltages, yes, you are getting electrosmog. Low intensity devices, I couldn't measure any, and now with the exception, I'm going to name names here because this company, Healthy Wave, Healthy Line product, is basically taking the 60 hertz signal from your house, from your wall socket, and they're pulsing it 7 or 8 times a second. That is electrosmog. Almost every other PEMF device in the market, and I haven't found anybody else do it because that's a cheap device made in China, but I wanted to call them out on this show because so many people are getting fooled by their review sites because they're so aggressive with marketing across the whole PEMF niche. And I took a lot of time dissecting their mat, putting it on an oscilloscope, and I didn't even know what they were doing until I saw it in my oscilloscope. So I didn't come into it thinking that was going to happen, because they claimed a 7.83 sine wave on their website. Okay, low battery, but I got time here.
Okay.
So yeah, most of the good PEMF devices have rectifiers that will change, and a lot of times at the wall too, like the IMRS and Beamer, you're pretty much filtering out that 60 hertz and you're putting a DC signal in. So he is getting more of a DC signal going into the unit, and the unit that through its frequency generator will then create the signal from the DC signal. But again, Healthy Wave, Healthy Line, they use the 60 hertz, so that would be dirty electricity. So things that, again, there are things that don't have electricity that are good, but a lot of the best healing devices that I know, like red light therapy and good PMF, vibration therapy, infrared sauna, require energy. But yes, you want to make sure you're getting a low. Some companies like TheraSauna they really focus on their low EMF emission coming out of it. I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to really get deep biological effects without having some form of, in my opinion, some energy.
Yeah, that's a good segue because someone asked a really good question that I always wonder about, and kind of circles back a little bit to our Magnetico talk. Like, does PEMF block the harmful effects of EMF while in use? And I think the context of this question is like, say you stay at a Hilton or something, or a hotel, and there's 30 Wi-Fi signals or whatever. If you bring if you're laying on the hotel bed with a PEMF device, is that could that potentially mitigate the surrounding EMFs in that harsh environment?
It's not so much that, like, Magna is one of the main influencers of helping people to, get rid of electrosmog from their house and their workplace, et cetera. And she's got all kinds of wonderful, well beyond my knowledge. I mean, I remember she did a conference at the IMRS once, but she actually used the MRS 2000 when it was called MRS 2000, and she was very good at live blood microscopy. And she did a little study where she was on her computer, and she would see after whatever 20 minutes on the computer, all her blood cells start to clump together, right? And then she did 8 minutes on the MRS 2000, and all of a sudden the Rouleau effect and all that appeared. And I know there's a lot of debates on whether live blood microscopy is accurate or not, but again, she was very good. And before seeing that for herself, right? She actually thought that she wasn't a big fan of any electrical healing device like that, because she, like you, or like you mentioned before, she kind of thought that that's going to give some kind of dirty electricity. But when she could see it for herself, the biological effect, it's like, oh wow, it's actually the opposite. It seems to be somehow protecting the body from electrosmog, but I think it's protecting it. Again, maybe while you're on the mat, yes, the energies they're kind of creating a bit of a shield in the sense, because you're getting more. But again, that's maybe just 8 minutes, so it's not like, I don't know if leaving the mat on, that's actually wouldn't. It would maybe not efficient, but that's what pulse does. So maybe that actually would work. If you just, with the IMRS, you can set it for an hour and you could just keep pressing start, but it would, that's not very energy efficient, but no, that actually would help a little. But there are other EMF protection devices, I think, that are more efficient. And that's not, like I told you before the show, I'm really interested in taking a deeper dive into that at some point, because, the writing's on the wall with 5G being everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the two that are popular, and I use them both, and it seems like they're efficacious, and they're really popular, though. The Blue Shield and the Soma Vedic, and they both work through different principles, but I've had personal experience with both that I felt something from them enough so to where I still use them, but it's nothing you can measure or prove, so people tend to think it's BS.
I'm not too familiar with those. Again, something I've done a lot of pendants and a lot of things in the past. Lately I haven't. I don't know what's going on right now, but I like I said, area I want to look at. So yeah, please do send me a link to those, because I'm interested. I want to try them out. I'm always trying stuff like that, just because that's like you. That's kind of who I am. It's like, oh, cool, let's work, right? But you get those few things that work, and it's like you kind of find a little treasure, like energy medicine treasure that.
Yeah. One side question I had for you, I didn't ask you in our phone conversations. I've been getting really into like Anton Priori, like energized plasma, and there's like Dan Winter, and there's other people making. I guess you could make it. His is really, really, really expensive. Paul Harris and Dan Winters, but the Therify. But there's other ones that you could buy for like 5-6K and stuff. Still expensive, but it's essentially like argon gas or neon gas, and you run high voltage through it, and it emits a plasma field, energized plasma field. To me, it's like a med bed. I really feel a positive effect from it. So I was just curious if you'd ever used one.
Well, I've used it. My friend, it was one of the top Rife research. I've been out of touch with them for like 15 years, but he had Craig Ledwell, I think. He had this Rife setup where he had the big tubes, because again, the original, beam ray was just, the kind of trying to carry on with what because Rife was using the plasma tubes in his early technologies. He didn't, a lot of people use Rife hand. I'm not saying they don't do anything, but the tubes is what Rife really did when he did that little cancer study. Had like 7 out of 10 people healed for whatever. But so yeah, I've tried various, like the Photon Genie and the, edge skilling device. And I even got a Photon Genius, I was disappointed because he didn't really do it right with I couldn't smell ozone at all with that. But the Photon, I could. So they're smaller plasma tubes. But they were using like some healing frequencies that were going on. Even like Jim Gerard, he's using again the tubes. Those are plasma tubes, smaller, where more of the ozone you're smelling is more of the corona discharge. And that was actually the original Violet Ray, test. He created that healing device that was basically plasma tubes like that. So he was really the of those plasma technologies. But my question would be is like, well, yes, you put the different gases in there, and Jim puts all the different gases. They all have different frequency spectrum, right? Because they're emitting what you're seeing is the light of the argon or whatever. It's the electrons jumping from a higher to a lower, and then they emit light. and the color that they emit depends on the every atom has a different spectra. This is how we can tell the composition of planets and stars, or not planets, stars. We can see that atomic spectra, and every atom is very precise in how it emits. It's almost like laser coherence, the way it emits these frequencies. But are they like pulsing or using any frequencies, or is it just the argon gas at a kind of a continuous voltage like that? I mean,
there's a big Tesla coil. So basically, it's a massage table, 2 TV stands on one TV stand on each side of the massage table at the head and your feet, and then you're the conduit. But underneath the table, there's a big box, almost the length of the massage table, with a tightly wound coil, horizontal kind of setup.
Which feel the most benefit of all of them you've tried?
I mean, the Therify definitely, it's 10 or 12 minutes. Some people even do a 3-minute session. That one I do think it's kind of overpriced for what it is, especially just that. When I first set it up, the wire was such high voltage that even touching the metal on the massage table, it sparked and started a fire. So I had to go and turn it off and blow out the fire, and the wire survived, but it's just very, but
there's no electrosmog coming out. That just sounds like are they somehow filtering out the 60 hertz I can't imagine, because you almost need that change. Even Jim's biocharger, he was utilizing the 60 hertz in a way because you got to
that's a good question. Yeah, because there's 2 units. Well, there's one actually control unit, so I don't know what's in there. I'd have to open it up and see, which I don't know if I know what I was looking at, but I know I feel good.
I maybe we could do this off the show, but I'm doing some of the stuff you're trying like that too. I haven't tried everything. I've tried a lot of stuff, but certainly haven't tried everything.
Yeah, I've been really into the oxygen therapy. I just had my friend Victor Sagalovsky. He started Light Water with Robert Slovak, the deuterium depleted water company, and we spent a day, and we were on my lake on the kayaks under a full moon. It was great. Just almost until 1 a.m. Just all of us on the lake. And he's really big into oxygen therapy and like hyperbaric. He was saying, like, we use the same hard chamber, 2 atmospheres. And his argument pro hyperbaric, because it's unnatural. People say, just go outside and breathe. But his argument is, the Earth's magnetism used to be higher. There used to be more oxygen, maybe more barometric pressure, just, where hyperbaric comes in.
That's speculative. There's no question the field was stronger. That's not, nobody doubts that. They actually got good proof because they can switch, in the pole. There's actually ways through like ceramic pottery of ancient civilizations. The ceramic pot almost holding, there's a way that the ceramic will form based on the intensity, the whole thing. You can get it very accurately. You can kind of see how the magnetic field of the Earth has declined over the past, say, especially 400 or 500 years, where we got really good. If you go back too far, it loses its whatever. But the atmospheric pressure, that I don't buy. But
interesting.
We're not living in a dome with, but we're not living at home. We do lose. This is one of the flat Earth thing, but they do talk about like the atmosphere leaking out, and there was, and again, but you gotta say, okay, but how much atmosphere is there? It's just such a vast amount. The amount that leaking out, it sounds like it's a lot. So it's true. There might be a little less atmosphere, but you got me thinking. I'm going to revisit that because the atmosphere leaks. And if I take that back several thousand years, I'd be interested to see if I'm sure it's not a constant leakage rate, but it out. But let's go on to the next question.
Well, this is kind of a variation, and I don't know if you have a different answer on the last one, but my friend John asked this one: can a high non-native EMF environment interfere with how PEMFs impact the body? Like, I know Jack Cruz used to say, because I used to combine the Magnetico and the grounding sheet, and he was like, don't do that because or I think even the Magnetico said don't do that because the magnetic field would hit the silver threads in the earthing sheet and then create a secondary field or something like that. But
it doesn't do that. But you will create a secondary field with a PEMF. Because this is what happens, but you need a changing magnetic field to do that. Static magnets are not a changing magnetic field. The Faraday induction is 0 because the rate of change is 0. And again, all you got to do is you can, on an oscilloscope, a static magnet is just a flat line. How are you inducing any currents in that wire if it's just a flat line? You're not. If you jiggled the magnet fast enough, then you could start to see currents to start to move. But it's only, and this is why they originally by accident discovered, by the way, Ampere's law and Faraday's law came from what's his name? Just one, I forget his name, but he just accidentally discovered how moving a magnet or whatever kind of created this. They were trying to figure something out, and they were almost by accident figured out that this changing magnet created a current in the wire. And it was pretty startling that the static magnet was doing nothing. But when you move the magnet, and all of a sudden you can start creating a measurable current in the meter, it would show a current show up, right? So I had one then early on when I was doing the MRS 2000 was putting earthing sheets over the top of her MRS 2000. I said, don't do that, because changing magnetic field will absolutely create a re-radiating field. Because what happens is you jiggle the electrons in the silver threads, right? And those jiggling electrons are little tiny and transmitting antennas. That's what antennas do. They jiggle electrons and they re-radiate. So then you get a secondary re-radiation field, as Jack said. That's true, but you need this changing magnetic field to do that. Now, could there be some little? I mean, but magnetic fields go through everything, including lead. You have to have a type of material that it doesn't block magnetic fields; it just diverts them in a different pathway, right? But the magnetic field, a dipole, there's no magnetic monopole, at least as far as we know. Even though string theory might like that, we've never seen one. But because magnets are a dipole, the south pole always finds its north pole. So because of that, you can't block a magnetic field, because if there was magnetic monopoles, like there are positive and negative charge, right? This is why there's dielectrics, right? Because you can surround a positive charge by negative charge, and then that shields the electric field. But there's no positive north pole. You can't isolate a little tiny north pole, a little tiny south pole, and you surround them by south poles or north poles, right? Because there is no, if you cut a magnet in half, you get another north and south pole. You can keep going down all the way to the atomic level, and even the atoms and the electrons have a north and a south pole. You can't cut an electron in half. So the bottom that the magnets are always dipoles because of that. That's the unique reason why they can penetrate through everything. So honestly, with an earthing sheet, if you look at the what's it called, the Simona beds, a really high end bed, magnets and earthing type of technologies, and they do that because the magnets aren't going to interfere because they're not changing magnetic field. So what Jack says is actually not based on science. He said stuff about PMF before that's also not based on science, but he knows a lot more about a lot of things related to a lot. He's a brain surgeon, so I'm not going to pretend to know as much about the human body, but I used to teach physics, so I can tell you right now, that's patently not true. You could use your earthing sheet and your Magnetico. Again, the guy, that's how they created this bed. It's this, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's this high-end bed that has really good.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy because they just mark up by like 8,000 this one bed, the Swiss Dream bed. I had a show with them, so instead of 12 grand, you get the same bed for $3,000, and it's or $2,000.
That's why I didn't get a Simona bed. I'm like, okay, the rubber, the organic, whatever, that's great. End of the day, I can get this mattress for $2,000, and then all I got to do is get like Magnetico and like some earthing technologies, and then like an incline, because there's a really good show that have bed at a slight incline does help with a lot of different things. So why would I pay $18,000 for something like, of course, he knew a lot about sleep. I picked because he you really want to go the full length. He just shuts his whole power off at night, when you go to sleep. I mean, yes, I unplug my, make sure no Wi-Fi, but I don't totally shut my power off, but I get where he's coming from. That's a good way to, so anyway,
that was great. Yeah. I'm 100% off grid here, besides my reliance on diesel, propane, and gasoline. Other than that, that's my only fuel I'm dependent on, but I have solar here. And, if I don't do that, I'm on a propane generator. But it's interesting moving on grid to fully off grid, the difference in feeling, since I'm not connected to other houses around me, it's a totally different feeling. It's pretty cool.
you got your setups. I mean, gosh, you outdo me. I thought I was like, but you're
no, I'm always working on it. I mean, it sucks to be dependent on the sun for power. So I wish we had, my neighbors looking at wind and I think hydroelectric is the ultimate current off-grid technology that we have access to, but you need a very specific property to make that work, so
differentials in the ground too, if you because you can create electricity if you got a great enough thermal difference. You got to be in a certain place where you have enough different energy.
Yeah. I'm going to tap into the Earth's, I think it's 54 Fahrenheit. I'm going to tap into the Earth's temperature for my geodesic dome I'm putting up in the next few weeks. Because I think it's 4 or 5 feet down, and you could keep the temperature inside stable.
Nice.
Should be fun.
That should be definitely.
Well,
let's try another question here. Let's try speed.
To speed round. Can PEMF have negative effects, and in what instances? Like I've heard, like if you have metal implants, is it still okay? Or
no, I mean we contrand for epilepsy, electronic, well, especially like pacemakers, and what was the other one? Well, pregnant women, but that's just a universal contraindication. It actually probably would help pregnant women, but from supplement industry, it's like something goes wrong with a pregnant woman, you don't want to be on the other end of the lawsuit. So that was the biggies are epilepsy. Now the epilepsy studies are interesting because it actually shows that it might have been something like 7% of the time it might trigger a seizure. But the overall, if you stuck with it, and again, that's 1 out of 15 or whatever. It's not like a terrible amount, but it's enough to make it a contraindication. But it seemed like there was good evidence that if you stuck with it, you could help to reverse some of the. I'm not saying it's a cure for epilepsy, but you could sort of help to regenerate the nervous system and help to mitigate. Because again, I think they might do stuff with epilepsy with transcranial manipulation even to help to try to. But I'm sure that you could get triggering people with a seizure. So you always run that risk of when you're dealing with producing microcurrents. If somebody's really sensitive to going into an electric, because it's basically electrical storm almost when they're in a seizure.
Right.
The implants, we actually had a lot of people with pacemakers that used PEMF. But I had to guide them to do research on their pacemaker specs to see what the pacemaker was rated for as far as a changing, again, not just Gauss. It's the intensity of a changing magnetic field. And I forget the name of the pacemaker companies, but the two main ones seems like I was dealing with most of the time, all of their new pacemakers were rated for way beyond even the highest level in the IMRS. So I would say, this pacemaker is rated for, and you can make your buying decision. I can't tell you that it's okay to buy it because I have to tell you it's a company. But still, you can read between the lines and see that. So really, honestly, at the end of the day, there's really not a whole lot for the low intensity. For high intensity, it can be a lot more complications for sure. Low frequency, low intensity. Again, low repetition rate, low intensity. Those are the only ones that we have to say are absolute contraindications, and like I just explained, they can be benefited.
That's great. This is a really good one, Bryant. How is PEMF therapy different from grounding? They produce similar health benefits.
So grounding, it's basically the Earth's natural microcurrent therapy. So, the telluric currents come from the global energy cycles of lightning strikes. There's basically this voltage potential between the ionosphere and the surface of the ground. And again, the fair weather electric field's about 150 volts per meter, which is not that strong. But it's during lightning, it can shift. The voltage potential switches during a lightning, like a storm, and it becomes a lot higher. But for most of the time, but so this whole global circuit, then part of it is that lightning strikes the ground, and all these currents are running through the ground. So we're talking about like 7 million lightning strikes a day or something like that. It's a lot of lightning happening around the world every day. So these currents, these currents, because the Earth is a conductor, right? So so when you walk barefoot, you're kind of plugging into the natural microcurrent therapy of the Earth, but that's not magnetic field. That's an electrical current, and the magnetic field. There's always going to be a magnetic field around a current, but they're very small currents, so you're going to get negligible magnetic fields coming off with it. But the magnetic field of the Earth is different, and the Schumann resonance is different. But just the actual microcurrents of the earthing or grounding. Now, the earthing pads and all the grounding technologies, it can be a double-edged sword, because you can have underground, like electrosmog, like the underground power lines. And Magna Havas is first to turn me on to this, because I didn't really like, I bought all that earthing grounding stuff, and I wasn't liking it. And I sensed that I even staked it outside. I staked it in my ground. I didn't want to plug it into the wall. I didn't trust that at all. But even staking it outside, I think there was some kind of ground currents going on outside my house, because it was giving me an uncomfortable. And I even had this whole cocoon to sleep at night, a whole earthing thing. I was a cocoon of it. I was just bugging out. I mean, it was just making me, it's like, this is just so uncomfortable. I just ended up putting it all in the closet. But then you get other people reporting all these wonderful benefits. And so it's like, I think it really depends on, like, someone like you probably would get benefits. If you're way out in the middle of nowhere, you could take it in and really get an EMF free, like, ground current that's truly Earth's natural ground currents, not all the stray currents coming from all the power lines and stuff that we got going on, but PMF is a totally different quality type of energy. So electric currents are not the same as PMF. It's not the same as electric fields. It's not the same as light. They're all governed by Maxwell's equations, but they're all qualitatively different energies. And you can see this just by looking at how you measure the intensity of each of those totally different units. So, but they are all interrelated. That's beyond the scope of this talk, but it's actually fascinating, all tie together. They are all very qualitatively different. They're not do both. One is not going to. So I walk barefoot. I just choose to walk barefoot like 45 minutes or spend. But I'm not a fan of the earthing products. But some people love them, so I'd be just like, yeah, try it out. Hopefully, you got a nice ground currents outside your house. It might be nice.
Right. Yeah. No, the context of that is great. That's what I always encourage. And yeah, I sleep grounded with a rod in the earth, and I love it. But yeah, the context piece is huge, and you have to listen to your body. If you use it and you don't feel good the next day, then don't use it. It's like
environment. So another problem having the silver threads, right, is that's like little antenna in that sheet, right? So again, if you're around a bunch of electrosmog radiation, all the electrosmog will be jiggling the electrons in those silver threads, and it can give you an uncomfortable. So it can be both the underground currents and where you're staking the rod, and you can just be surrounded. You can have a cell phone tower right next to you or something, right? And you put that earthing sheet on, you just go berserk, because it's like it's picking up all that. But if you're out in the woods or you're out in an area where you don't have all this stuff, then you lay it. You're plugging into nature's natural telluric currents, and that can be very therapeutic. So I think it's good in theory, but in practice, it depends on a lot of, and mainly environmental factors, really.
Yeah, it was funny. But before I moved into mountain life, I was renting an RV for my friends, and what I did is I grounded the metal frame of the RV. It was just parked in their backyard, in like a ghetto neighborhood, and I grounded it to a rod filled with shungite powder. Oh. And then I was sleeping on a Magnetico. I think it was a 10 or 15 Gauss, but there was a power line right above the RV that I couldn't change, right above my bed, maybe 12 feet. And I still slept okay. I think the Magnetico mitigated that power line quite a bit, because my sleep was fine.
Okay. Well, that's good. But I didn't miss on earthing pads and stuff. So I think those things that, where with PMF, it's much more, I'm not going to say it's 100, nothing's 100%. There's people that are going to complain. You always get those hyper-electrosensitive people that, and again, I'm sure they really are getting, even the low intensity can be too much for them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we had to put it to the lowest level on the IMRS, which is just in the nanotesla. It gets into the hundreds of nano. Very, very weak. And then we put a piece of foam in between the mat. I had one person, you just have to keep creating separation, because as you create separation, you get less of a field. Mm-hmm. But some people are really, really sensitive, and even low intensity can sometimes be too much. But it's very rare. I found that most people could start off on because the IMRS did have a sensitive level, which is a very low intensity for sensitive people. And if they didn't do well on that level, there's probably not many other PMF devices on the market that they would do well with.
Mm-hmm. What about this one, Brian? What would cause a metal taste in your mouth after starting PEMF? Is that moving heavy metals around?
It could be. Yeah, it could be. PMF does detox. That's. I did a whole video on the healing crisis. Sometimes that can be a result of the healing crisis, where you're, especially if you had like dental implants or something, and they didn't right, or they maybe you still have them in your mouth. Because I mean that's what I'm not gonna. I don't know the answer to that because probably a very individual situation. So I don't know what's going on, but I would guess it's probably just prices because I mean obviously there's nothing in the field itself that's going to have any heavy metals, right? So whatever she's tasting is her own body releasing something, which is probably just a detox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good one. Thoughts on the Healy device?
Yeah, I by probably at least a half a dozen of my MLM friends, network marketing, and I don't know. I never got excited about it. I mean, I know some people that loved it and got excited about it, but I just never drawn to. But have you had experience? You might have had more. I have.
I try to buy every device if it's somewhat affordable, and I tried it and I felt nothing. I used it maybe 10 times and didn't feel anything good or bad, so I stopped using it. But kind of a good segue. Someone asked recommendations for a good PEMF product. So it's like IMRS and Beamer are kind of your two, right?
I mean, Centropics, like I told you, is a new one that's still maybe unproven, but there's just not that many. I mean, I tell people there's 3 things to look for in a PEMF device. You got to look. It's the coils, it's 2 things. It's the coils and the signal. But you got to look at the signal from, I say, 2 eyes. You got to look at it from the eye of the oscilloscope, which is what the wave looks like, and what you're looking for is a wave that has a sharp rise and fall. And this actually was the NASA's Dr. Goodwin study with NASA, very clearly showed that there was in like a 3-dimensional like cell culture that you were getting much better results with a rapid rise and fall signal, which is it's simply Faraday's law. It actually makes perfect sense why that's the case, because if you have a rapid rise and fall, you're going to induce more microcurrents. So I always tell people PEMF is like 3D microcurrent therapy because you're inducing microcurrents deep within the tissue without impedance, unlike microcurrents, by the way. Again, microcurrents are very well researched. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm just saying that PEMFs are going to provably go deeper than microcurrents will. And so you want that. And a lot of PEMF devices on the market use a simple sine wave. That's the biggest problematic one, is a sine wave, because it's such a slow rise and fall. And then you're only getting one frequency at a time. So the other thing you want to look at is, so you want a rapid rise and fall, and that signal, whether it's a square wave signal or a Beamer signal or a triple sawtooth signal like QRS and IMRS, you want the repetition rate. So the repetition rate is basically the frequency of the pulses. And sometimes they're bundles of 3 or 4 pulses even. So you want that to be pulsing at 15 hertz in the morning, or some beta energizing frequencies in the morning. But at night, you want those pulses to be turning on and off more at 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6 hertz, very low theta delta frequencies, because that'll help you go to sleep. And the brain is electromagnetic. So this is why the IMRS for me, and I've tried like over 25 PEMF, and I tell you, the IMRS for better sleep, that is easily the one. I'm not going to say it's the best one, and maybe there are other. Beamer is also good and has a lot of testimonials, and so there's some others that are good, but there's just not that many that seem to. Then the other thing is you want a good frequency spectrum. So this is where you look at a spectrum analyzer. So on the one eye is you look at the signal, the other is looking at the frequency domain. So when you see a square wave, we've all had, I think we've all in science class at some point had oscilloscopes where we can see little waves, or maybe not, but that's the time domain. So you're just seeing the wave as it appears in real time, like a water wave. You see it rippling. It's just what it looks like, right? Now we can't see some of these low frequencies because our eyes aren't tuned to it, but the oscilloscope allows us to see what they would look like if we could. Now, the frequency domain is telling you the frequency spectrum or the spectral content. And here you're looking for a broad spectrum of frequencies. It's kind of like Minkowski's multi-wave oscillator effect, because every tissue and cell has a little different vibratory resonant frequency. So we're trying to resonate with as many tissues and cells as possible, so that way we're healing the whole body and not just, this is another problem with sine wave signals. You're only getting a few frequencies, so you're missing out on working on the whole body at the magnetic resonance stimulation point of view. So based on one European study, looked at all these different PEMF devices, and they found the IMRS, the Beamer had the best 2 spectral, as far where they both had a very broad spectrum of frequencies. It's because they use very complex signals that have bundles and bundles of different frequencies and lots of complexity, which makes it difficult to talk about frequency in a signal like that because you're just dealing with like the repetition rate. So I just haven't found many PEMF devices that get both of those right, that are safe intensities, and that have large, like QRS would be good if they had, but their coils are wrong. And I tell people, why in the world would you buy a great stereo system and buy cheap speakers to go with it? Because the coils are the speakers, you know, and there are helical antennas, right? That create, so the coils are literally the transmitting antennas of the system, and your receiver, right? Your cells are picking up. This is why you want to make sure you got biologically active frequency spectrum. So otherwise it just passes through you with no effect, right?
Right.
And you want the coils to be big. You don't want little tiny. So the problem with biobalance is not only do they have a sine wave, but yes, they got a lot of coils, but they're smaller coils, and there's not as much flux, not as much, which means not as much induction, right? So big coils, broad frequency spectrum, rapid rise and fall pulse. And the rapid rise and fall pulses are a handful. It's like a sawtooth, a square wave. Again, the Beamer signal and the centropics use like this cascading. So you're getting plenty of the rapid up and down there. But you want to stay away from sine. There's just you're not going to get much healing from them, in my opinion. I mean, you get some resonant effects at that frequency. This is why, by the way, sine wave systems will give you these big, long list of different, you do this frequency for this frequency for that, this frequency, blah, 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 blah. Because you got to change the frequency. A good signal, it's like a good multivitamin. You're getting it all in there at once. You don't have to take vitamin C, vitamin D, and B12 and B1. And so that's actually a good metaphor, because it is like an electroceutical. Like instead of a nutraceutical, PEMF can act as an electroceutical that gives your body these essential life nourishing energies. Just as I call light there, like a vitamin that helps people with malillumination, right? Because we don't get enough of the good frequencies of light. Also, another problem, we get too much of the harmful fluorescent, complex fluorescent, or even just the poorly made LED lights for like lighting the house.
Right.
It's just not ideal for light, and we get problems from not full spectrum light in the morning and keeping the blue light at a minimum at nighttime. We get into all kinds of trouble there. So, but I would say, those things. And again, there are systems on the market now that I've been out of PEMF for about a year and a half. So Centropis was one of them, and it looks promising, but I haven't been able to look at it in the oscilloscope yet. And they can't answer some of my questions about repetition rate, which I think is very important. They're just dodging the questions. They can't seem to answer some of the questions I have, but they got a great spectral content. I saw Dr. Kafka, who developed the Beamer signal. He's the one that's developed the centropics. And I saw he did a whole webinar where he showed, he probably lost most people by doing, but I understood it. I'm like, well, I could have taught that a lot better, because he was just really assuming everybody understands, like, Fourier mathematics and spectral content. I mean, I was impressed. I'm like, okay, I hope he's getting the repetition right, so we got like neurologically appropriate frequencies for different times of the day. Because you don't want to be overstimulating people at nighttime before bed, right?
Right. Yeah. Have you seen those devices, Bryant? Because the latest PEMF devices I've been seeing go directly like on the head. Like there's one, I can't remember the name, that biohackers are promoting, that you could sit, quote unquote, you could simulate a cup of coffee, or very. I mean, the thing about I really like whole body. I mean, with the IMRS, you do the full body mat at nighttime on the low frequency, because your whole body is going, not just your brain. Mm-hmm.
So your whole nervous system from head to toe down to theta delta. But they do work though. Sometimes I would just use like the pillow on my head. It does the same thing, because the brain is the area that you're trying to slow those waves down to. So that, because the brain is electromagnetic and electromagnetic entrainment is real, especially with the brain, that those will work. Not going to get nearly as much therapy though as you will from a full body mat, because think about it. Let's say, of course, those aren't designed for that. They're just designed for kind of a type of purpose. But if you're healing, they'll give you a little help with your brain, maybe with headache stuff, but they're not gonna, if you got a serious problem, you definitely, I always tell people, that's another thing to look for device. You want a full body mat. Like the amp coil, just put the energy is going through the center of the coil. The rest of your body is getting yes, it's getting fields or electromagnetic field. It's not getting that pure magnetic field, right?
Mm.
So a full body cover the whole body. So that's also very important. Go ahead. Next question.
That's great. Let's see. Is PEMF effective for nerve regeneration?
Yes. Yeah. I don't have, I'm going off the top of my head and everything right now, but if I had in front of me some of my research documents, I could look up those studies. But yes, absolutely with nerve regeneration. Now, nerve cells are a little slower to regenerate than some other tissues. So it might take a little longer sometimes, like neuropathy, for example.
Yeah, people say you get that from high vitamin B6. That's a big scare. If you take like 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of vitamin B6, you can cause neuropathy.
Yeah, the neuropathy. What happens is people with neuropathy, part of it's the blood flow. Yeah, that's crazy. But again, because nerve regeneration, if it's neuropathy due to like damaged nerves, yes, PEMF will help. But you got to understand, you got to give it like 6 months. You got to really be doing every. Because what's going to first happen, if you really got numbness down there, is you start to feel that uncomfortable tingle and burning. In fact, I would have some neuropathy people. They were one of our more common people that wanted to return it and I'm like, listen, if your foot falls asleep and it wakes, it doesn't wake up, but we say, your foot falls asleep. But initially, you don't feel your foot; it's kind of numb, right? But then all of a sudden, you feel these really uncomfortable tingles that are not comfortable for a little while, right? If your neuropathy is worse. If your nerves have been damaged and you're not feeling anything down there, you're not feeling all the garbage that's going on down there, right? And there's a lot of junk that's happening down there that you're not even just feeling because you don't have so as soon as you turn the lights on down there, all of a sudden you get all this uncomfortable burning and tingling. It's like, I can't do this. It's like, well, you got to go slower because we don't want anybody to be in pain, obviously. But it's like, hallelujah, you're waking up, you're feeling something. I mean, I was trying to, it's like, listen, the fact that you're feeling anything is an improvement over feeling nothing. That means it's working. It's, but sometimes they just wouldn't get that, right? Does that make sense? Because, but that's why you sometimes have to go slow with PEMF. So even though there's no side effects, sometimes you can throw people into a Herxheimer too hard and too fast. Even with low intensity, with a really good signal. That's the beauty of having a good signal, is that it's not about intensity. Sometimes low intensity can put people into more of a real healing. Now, don't get me wrong here. A real healing crisis and high intensity. High intensity just flat out hurt people. That's different. A healing crisis, you can have ups and downs, right? As your body's getting better. Like when you fast, you can have this burst of energy while you're fasting, and all of a sudden you get a boom. If something's making you worse, you just kind of progressively get worse. That's not a good sign. Then you probably should stop doing that.
Mm-hmm. This is a good one. Earth pulse efficacy. I can't feel it or notice a difference in my aura ring. I think they market that for sleep, right? Sleep.
Oh, Earth Pulse I used, and again, what's his name back there? He's a nice guy. I mean, we butted heads because I didn't like it. His product, I used it for a year, and he's like, well, Paul Beck, I think is the name. Paul with, it's like he sent me another one. He's like, well, it's got to be defective. So I used that. I literally was using it for a year, and was trying everything, and it wasn't working for me at all. With the MRS 2000, the first night I used it, I got better sleep the first night. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. It just didn't work for me. That's all I can say. But it does. It's got a square wave, and they got the right frequency. I mean, conceptually, it seems like what they're doing should help. But you got to keep in mind, this is another misconception. Putting a little tiny ring under your mattress is not the same as laying on a full body mattress pad. Because again, where is that pure magnetic field coming from? The center of the coil. The problem with Earth Pulse is a little tiny thing, right? So you're only getting magnetic flux in a little tiny center there. That does not going to compare to having like 6 or 8 big coils. And it's night and day, right? And I know he was trying to explain to people, oh yeah, you get the same intensity. It's like, it's not the same at all. Not even but again, this is more of you're getting more maybe radiation there, but you're not getting the pure magnetic. So the fact that under a mattress, because when I put his Earth Pulse on my knee, like when I hurt my knee, I didn't like the feel of it at all. It just felt uncomfortable. I'm like, and that explained to me, this must be why I'm not sleeping well with it, because it's just, I'm putting it right next to my body, putting under a mattress but that's my experience.
Yeah. That's a good, someone asked on piggybacking, can you sleep on a PEMF mat all night, or is it better and safer to do short dosages? Like if it's low intensity, could you sleep on it? Or?
I mean, the Beamer has a sleep program where it turns on. You basically go into bed, it's on for a while, then it turns off, and then you set what time you want to wake up for, then it turns on again. I actually, and I use that extensively. I mean, I just tested out versus IM rest. I was actually sleeping better doing just like an 8 or 16 minutes IM rest. Now, if I had really bad insomnia, I might lay on the IM rest for like an hour and I would just go to sleep. I just put it right in my bed. And it works. Sometimes it would take a half hour or longer if I had really bad insomnia, but at some point it would kick in. It was just, that sleep. It's like that. All of a sudden your brain shifts from like awake, sleepy feeling. And then I would just roll. As soon as that happened, and again, sometimes it took, but usually 8 or 16 minutes, it would work. But sometimes it would take longer. So I would go upwards to an hour because you can set the timer for an hour, and I would just fall asleep on it because it's comfortable enough. I would put it under my sheet. So that way I had a sheet on top of it, and it was comfortable enough that I could lay on it. It was pretty comfortable. And the beamer is comfortable enough too, but I noticed better results of sleep over the beamer easily, doesn't I? And the reason is clear. I mean, beamer is using 10 hertz as a repetition rate. IMRS is using 0.5 hertz or 3 hertz towards nighttime.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Let me see. If you do a PEMF session and you don't feel anything from it, was it not needed?
Well, no, not feeling anything does not mean it doesn't work. People tend to think this is the problem with people gravitating to high intensity. They think that going to a trade show and having a device that makes their muscles twitch where they can feel it. Oh, I can feel it. It must be working better. No, not at all. I mean, there's a lot of very subtle things. Like when you take let's just an energy supplement, right? When you take a really good supplement, you might not initially feel anything right away, but maybe you take it over time and then your overall health starts to improve. And it can sometimes be very subtle like that. But for me, the very first night I did it, I noticed better sleep. And of course, when you sleep better, you wake up feeling better the next morning. And it's not, I mean, what I felt was just this kind of this cocoon of soft, warm, not warm, but in the sense of warm to the temperature, but just this warm, soft energy that just enveloped me. It's very subtle. So we found, and this is also based on the European doctors' trials, where they use the MRS in a clinical setting. And there's a book written by several doctors that's why they got over 500 clinical case studies with this signal, right? And they found about not even maybe 47% or 50% of people could feel something. For some reason, the other 50% didn't feel anything. But again, it has to do with sensitivity of their nervous system. Because some people, are taking opioids, and they're numbing their body so much that they just can't feel. They're not sensitive to energies. Where it seems like the people that meditate or are more clean and not doing all these drugs, they seem to be more able to feel it because they're more sensitive to subtle energies.
Yeah. I wonder even psychedelics too. Like people are taking these to feel more, take a bunch of mushrooms and then go on a PEMF to feel it more.
Yeah. Moderation. Does open up it opens people up to there's much more in the physical plane. I mean, but obviously you can overdo that. You want to ultimately do meditation to be able to get to those states, not rely on on plant, that type of plant medicine. But again, the ayahuasca or doing those type of journeys. I mean, if you got someone that's really skilled you really got to have someone that knows what they're doing. Right?
Yeah.
If you try on your own, you can end up in a bad place, if you don't know.
I did a whole show with a guy, Hamid, and he's called the Mineral Shaman, on how plant medicines deplete minerals. And he was saying a lot of the quote bad trips or bad journeys that people do, it's because they're going in with a magnesium or a copper deficiency or all these nutrient deficiencies. And then that just kind of burns out the brain because the body can't handle
side coming out too a little bit. So it depends on their consciousness as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if that goes with it a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. This is a funny one. Are they pumping us with metals so that humans can be affected by EMPs? It's electromagnetic pulses.
Yeah. Well, again, the metals are in the chemtrails in the air. That anybody that doesn't believe in chemtrails is just they're fast asleep in mainstream media news. I mean, but the chemtrails have the aluminum and the barium and all this stuff falling out of the sky. And there's been plenty of people that have been able to in areas where it was bad, you could almost take a swab or something, and you could see that it's under I think Mike Adams done something like that. But those metals are, I mean, you look up in the sky, it's like, oh, maybe I should sit inside today. But unfortunately, it's a real thing. And then you got like the HAARP, the HAARP and different types of electromagnetic, like huge arrays of antennas in Alaska and other parts of the world that definitely manipulate weather. And all you got to, whenever you see the clouds that have all that ripple effect, where it looks like those are not natural, or like the flying saucer clouds. I mean, or you see these are not natural cloud formations. These are based on HAARP and metal. The interaction of these chemtrails is what's basically make little antenna so that they can pump and manipulate the weather. I mean, basically for manipulating weather, but certainly they don't mind that it's toxic. I mean, I'm not going to claim to know absolute, but
I think there's that documentary like Angels Don't Play This HAARP, and there's been documentaries on it.
Of that, yeah, because and if you try to go anywhere near HAARP in Alaska, you're going to confront military. You're won't let you anywhere near that thing. So something weird is going on there. I mean, and I think there's plenty of people with the geoengineering, weather engineering, that have from the inside have been whistleblowers. In fact, there was a guy that I talked to someone that knew someone that flew these planes, and they're basically told not to ask any questions, right? But I wish I could remember the details, but the guy remembered this is not a regular plane. There's some switches he had to turn on and certain things he had to do, but they try to keep it from the pilots too. So a lot of times the pilots don't even know what they're doing. But if you're an astute pilot, opens your eyes and looks, it's like you see there's something off about this, what's going on here. The conspiracy that really is happening, unfortunately. And of course, then they're trying to do. Bill Gates has these aerosols that he wants to do to try to blot out the. And again, that's not conspiracy. He's flat out said this in public. That global warming, which, if you ask me, is a hoax. They're trying to do all this weird stuff to. Who knows what their ultimate end game? I still can't figure. It just seems like besides control, right? You control the whole.
I've heard it's global cooling. Have you heard that? Like they're kind of pushing us to believe it's global warming, but then we're going into another ice age, which is kind of a scary thought if that's true.
Yeah. Well, if we would just stop tinkering with with these HAARP and chemtrail baloney, the Earth knows how to regulate itself. It knows how to create homeostasis, and throughout the many eons of time on planet Earth, and they have good evidence. There's ways you can measure all this. I mean, you can see that there's times where the ice ages are obviously we know where there is a global cooling. Then you got times where there is like a warming, but what happens is when there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, then how does the Earth regulate that? Well, trees eat carbon dioxide, so trees start to flourish and thrive because you're basically giving them all their food that they need. So trees start to grow really fast. They suck all the carbon dioxide out and take care of the global warming. So you got these cycles, and this is the whole Gaia. It's called the Gaia theory, not just hypothesis anymore. James, what's his name? Lovelace or Lovelock, I forget his name, but he talks about the Gaia hypothesis, and it's the Earth is a self-regulating organism, and that applies to temperature too. Basically, we just need to get out of the way and let nature just create balance, and nature always brings itself back to balance. And we're the ones creating the imbalances right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's more for global cooling. But the whole global warming thing I won't get into that on this show. It's beyond. But there's other agendas at play. Let's just leave it at that. I think with the whole global warming.
Right. This is a good one on pet health. Can PEMF help heal a dog's muscular injury? It's funny at my post office. His dog wasn't doing well and he was having joint issues and stuff. I gave him a grounding sheet, and they're in the city. And he said it was night and day. He gravitates towards that sheet. So another context thing, I think, with the grounding sheet, but it seemed to help that.
Aside here, man, my battery's about to die.
Oh yeah.
Let me just you can edit this out.
That's fine.
We can keep talking. I mean, out here because I didn't mention this, but it's kind of my theme. It's like try as much time in nature as possible, and when you can't get enough of nature's elements,
Is that your lake? Do you live on a lake or?
Well, it's a river. It's a Braden River.
Cool. Oh, cool.
It's really nice. I mean, it's just kind of like an acre of land, and I only like one neighbor over here and
Nice.
no neighbors over there. So I'm across the street. But I love living out in the country. I'm not maybe as off the grid as you are, but still rely on electricity. I have some backup generators, of course, but I mean,
that's great. Well, it's nice to live on a body of water since my first house had a creek, and so great.
But yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I don't want to. I've been here 7 years, and I really don't want to move. See, I mean, this might be my last year because I think he's got some plans of selling or something, but we'll see. So I'm just.
Moving is a lot of work and energy. I know that well.
Yeah. Electrosmog at the moment here.
I don't think we'll go too much longer, so I won't fry you in the Wi-Fi.
It's okay. So I just had a mold issue in this house, so everything's all over the place because I got other house side of the house is quarantined off because we had a mold situation.
Oh, that's right. You were telling me on the phone. Yeah, you had it like treated or.
Yeah, I know. Oh God, that helped a lot. It was just basically vinegar and hydrogen peroxide, and it really worked. I mean, it's fogging the house with that. So it's about the most natural way you can do it, but it worked.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to you about ozone because that's one thing. I have a friend that's really into it, and he got me into rectal insufflation with ozone gas, which is pretty close to autohemotherapy, like taking your blood out, ozonating it, putting back in. It's like almost the same thing.
Yeah, my doctor. I do have a doctor. I haven't seen him in quite a while, but I did a little insufflation with him for a while, and he's seen a lot of great benefits come from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first 20 years of my life I was in a moldy home because I was near the beach, so a lot of mold in those houses.
That's the problem of being in Florida. I'm by the water and I'm in Florida. Yeah, that's
right.
A constant problem. So
right. So the question, I guess, just pet health, whether it's a dog or a cat. My neighbor recently had his cat got in a fight, and he's like 17 years old, and I don't want to keep saying grounding sheet testimonials, but I gave him a grounding sheet and he plugged it into the third prong in his shop. And again, off grid, so different situation, but it healed. But I thought about bringing some of my PEMF or plasma over to beam the cat, but he healed up fine. And he put like colloidal silver on, like a zinc ointment and zinc and silver, and it helped. But PEMF for like injured cats and dogs is huge, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, we got several dog testimonials, and again, I love my animal testimony. We got some really good horse testimonies, like shipping fever, Cushing's disease, really powerful ones. And the dog, I forget the details of the dog testimonials, but some really powerful dog testimonials. We had a cat with cancer that got better using it.
Wow.
Remember, animals, my favorite testimonials, because animals don't have placebo. Right. So when they're getting benefit, they're getting benefited. My little Chihuahua, I mean, if I'm not doing well, I'll get him on the mat. And again, for me, this is the thing about PEMF. It is definitely my go-to. If I hurt myself, twist my ankle, hurt my knee. I mean, over the past 15 years, I've had all kinds of things come up. Bad neck and red light too. I mean, PEMF, red light. I'll do both typically if it's and it works. It really just flat out works. I mean, now hurt yourself really badly, you got to do several treatments, and sometimes the pain will intensify before it gets better. That's actually happened to me once. Almost always it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
Interesting. Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, it seems like when you live in the country, stuff's going to happen. I get cuts and scrapes all the time, and just little injuries, and it's nice to have red light and PEMF to heal faster, which is what they're speed healing.
A whole bunch of fire ant bites, not just one, but several once, and I put my foot. I used a little ointment too, but I put my foot on the mat, and it's just sort of, because you can tell with PEMF, it really does take like the inflammation away. You can feel it. Again, if you're sensitive to energies, you can just kind of feel it sucking the inflammation out of you a little. I mean, again, it's very subtle, but it's just like, I call it energetic ice. The beautiful thing about PEMF versus ice is that it gives you all the anti-inflammatory benefits of ice, but then it gives you all the circulatory benefits of heat without exacerbating inflammation, because heat will sometimes exacerbate inflammation, right? So you kind of get the best of both worlds of PEMF, both heat and ice, the circulatory. And And then, by the way, it does upregulate anti-inflammatory cytokines and downregulates inflammatory cytokines, something that heat won't do. That's why you can increase the circulation and still decrease the inflammation.
Oh, that's awesome. One question I wanted to ask you, we've talked about so many things, but like you mentioned the element air. Have you ever done like exercise with oxygen therapy? I've been kind of looking into that recently. It's really interesting.
Oxy bounce. I mean, I did it with like rebound.
You
know, I'm probably going to eventually get back into that again. I haven't been doing it lately, but I'll probably do hyperbaric. To me, that makes a little more sense than doing. Again, if you do hyperbaric intermittently, how often do they typically recommend? I'm not a hyperbaric expert, but
yeah, it seems like there's a synergy between like oxygen therapies, whether it's ozone, EWAT, or hyperbaric, and then PEMF and red light, like all those kind of work together.
Yeah. Well, my friend Jim, I don't recommend this, but he put his PEMF mat inside his he's like very well, right? So he gets all this stuff. And he goes about doing, but he put his PEMF mat right inside his hyperbaric chamber. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to recommend that, but it's pretty well sealed because obviously oxygen, you got to be careful with.
Yeah, I think my misconception is it's 100% oxygen, but it's not. I have 2 oxygen concentrators, and there's liters per minute. There's 5 and 10, your average. Mine's 210, so I have 20 liters per minute going in, and that brings it up to about, I think it's 28% oxygen or something. So it's nowhere near 100.
For sure, but still, I mean,
it's mainly the pressure, I think, is the benefit.
He likes that. He combines them at the same time.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, because when you get into all these devices, there gets to a point where you're like, how do I have time in the day to use even a couple of them?
Well, the one thing about like the Juven is of course if you get a big red, because not everybody can afford a red light therapy bed, which I do have a bed, but you can get a panel and just stand in front of red light while you're doing vibration, right? Mm-hmm. And you hook your nose up to oxygen at the same time. So even with PMF, you could still put it you could wrap a PMF thing around your waist or something too at the same time. So we actually figure a way to do a lot at once. It's kind of fun to get creative like that, to think of ways you can combine these things. So I'm with you though. You have to sort of, otherwise you could just be doing therapies all day long. You have to live your life too. I mean, you can't just.
Right. This is a good one that we didn't go into, I don't think. And I don't think I told you this in our previous conversations. My first PEMF device was the SOTA. It was $350, I think. The SOTA pulsar, which you can put like a paper clip on. It'll shoot it.
I know.
I think and I know there's a lot of education about positive, negative, north, south. And someone asked like, what's your opinion on south polarity versus north polarity?
Yeah, that's more applicable to just static magnets.
Okay. Because this was a paddle. One side was south, one side was north, right? But
the SOTA pulsar is just a capacitor discharge. That's why it's not the best PMF device. And again, the cheaper, no, the pulse center is this solid state, but a lot of companies are using the more capacitor discharge type of technologies that are not nearly as ideal. But again, what's the north and what's the south? If you have a changing signal, it's constantly changing polarity. Like a sine wave is twitching like this, So when now good devices like Beamer and IMRS and QRS too switch polarity every 2 minutes, but they're not switching they're just switching the direction of the current. So the current goes from clockwise around the coil to counterclockwise, and you hear like a little click. So on an oscilloscope, what's happening is the signal just gets the mirror image gets turned upside down. So you get the mirror image of the signal after a polarity switch. So, but a true north and true south discussions are really only applicable for static magnets, because there you do have a constant north and a constant south. Where with a pulse magnetic field, it's just constant, it's always kind of changing, right? And you almost have to say, okay, we're going to use a right-hand rule. Let's say we can say clockwise is north and counterclockwise is south, but it's not the same argument. It's not like a static magnet north-south. So that is a common question that people don't understand with polarity. which is more applicable to static magnets, not PEMF.
Interesting. Is there a way to DIY PEMF? Like, could you go to Home Depot and build one?
No, you can't. I mean, again, like soda, I think soda, like the Bob Beck protocols with soda and stuff, I think he gave the blueprints for a lot of this, that you can make them yourself. I mean, Hilda Clark did the same thing with her zapper. She said, well, here, you can make it yourself, or, but those are pretty crude type of ways to do it. The really good PEMF devices have a very sophisticated frequency generator. So if you make it yourself, you're going to have to invest in a frequency generator. And then you've got to then wire, and basically you're just to wire in some kind of a comfortable mat container, or if you can just do something like the high intensity, just make a loop, like a current loop. That's not hard. The hardest part is getting the power supply to then to generate a really good PEMF signal that has a good frequency spectrum and a good rapid rise and fall. And that is something that's a lot. The thing is a lot of these good companies put a lot of research into the signal. So I have found that a poorly made signal can have no benefit to people. So sometimes people think PEMF doesn't work when they just didn't get a machine that worked well, So you want to create, again, the reason I talk about the rapid rise and fall, the frequency spectrum, and the big coils that are tightly wound is all of those come together in a perfect storm for the best PEMF device, because all those things are adding to the the molecular, the cellular, the biochemical, the tissue, organism benefits of inducing the microcurrents, increasing cell voltage, increasing microcirculation. So if you don't get the signal right, you're not, maybe you got a simplistic sine wave, then you're not going to be resonating the tissue frequencies are enough. Or if you don't have a rapid rise and fall, then you're not inducing any healing microcurrents. Or you are, but not very much, right? And I could see this on the oscilloscope. I could see that sine wave signals were not inducing as much voltage on my near field probe, which means it's not going to be inducing as much energy or currents in your body, the healing currents, right? Again, you're using your own body's charges, just for clarity. You're not actually adding currents deep to the body. You're simply inducing through Faraday's law all your own natural ions, because you have a lot of charged particles in your body that are in all the different, sodium, chloride, potassium, all those are charged. And so they're going to be affected by magnetic fields because they're charged. So it's that. So you want to have a signal that's going to have a rapid rise and fall to induce the flow of the charge, like charging up the transmembrane potential, right? The sodium potassium pump, responds to a good rapid rise and fall signal. So that's why you want a sharp rise and fall. So I mean, you could try to do it yourself, but honestly, unless you're a really good engineer and you really understand signal processing, how to make a good signal, it'll probably not work as well as if you just get a good system.
Yeah, that's great. I'm getting a little feedback. Let's see. Oh, I think it's better now. I was hearing myself through your speaker. I think.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Let's see. I think you already answered this. Does the shape of the PEMF wiring provide any benefit? Example, the rodent coil. So your thing is full body is what you look for.
Oh yeah. Well, no. The rodent. No, there's a. I would not use a rodent coil for a PEMF because it's just a pure fit. There's this one little, I think it's another key coil. This Asian guy sells this little handheld thing that's got this weird winding. And unfortunately, it might have some benefit, but it's not going to be a pure PEMF field, because the only way to create a perfectly pure magnetic field is a current loop or a solenoid. You can't be winding, because if you wind it like that, then you're going to have all the field lines are going to be interfering with each other, and you're going to end up with an electromagnetic field coming off that thing. But what we're looking for is a pure magnetic field. That's where all the main healing properties come. So there is nothing except a pure, tightly wound circular coil, whether it's a pancake flat solenoid or a column, like say a probe, or like a column solenoid that's tightly wound, that will give you the same type of pure magnetic field that a bar magnet will. Only with a difference, of course, as we mentioned, is you're going to have a field that changes with time. That's where all the dynamic benefits come from. So yeah, I would not recommend any of these other funky windings. There's this one guy that makes like this sacred geometry winding of, it's like
that's the question someone asked. I pyramid. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, it's some, I forget his name. He had all these videos. He's basically wiring this thing. He says, "Oh yeah, this is PMF. It'll help your whole house." And it's like, well, whatever it's doing, it's not really PMF in the way that I define PMF. Because when you got all those winding, even if it's like some beautiful sacred geometry, Star of David, like whatever he's done, like why you're not going to get a pure magnetic because they're all the wires are crossing each other. So you're going to get all this interference happening. And again, if it's done right, perhaps you could get some kind of electromagnetic field that's maybe interesting, but it's not going to be proven. There's no, almost every single good PMF study is using some kind of coil. You never see somebody using a rodent coil or a weird, wacky winding geometry on a PMF study. They're all either solenoids or pancake solenoids, or sometimes they're squares. There's nothing wrong with a square if it's a tightly wound square, like Beamer does that in their B pad, because again, it's not going to be too far off from a perfectly circular current loop because it's a square with tightly wound winds. You got a nice flux in the middle, right?
Interesting.
But that's all I've seen in actual real studies. That's the only type of geometries I've seen.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of these people that create those little sacred geometry products, it kind of discredits the real field of PEMF therapy.
Exactly, it does. Yeah, and then they try to say how it's better. I remember this guy, the Asian guy, he did all these comparison videos to IMRS and Beamer. Somehow some little tiny handheld thing is going to be the same as a full body mat with 30 years of 25 years of research, and his has basically nothing. He just has all these sacred geometry like ours has more frequencies, and again, he just plays on people's ignorance, and I say ignorance in a nice way, where people don't understand what frequency really means with regards to a PMF signal. And I didn't even understand it fully when I first started. It took me doing a deep dive in signal processing until I really got it. I mean, now I really get it. And I can teach people how to understand frequency in the context of PMF, but I made the same mistake early on. I didn't really understand it properly, and I was saying, it wasn't untrue. I was just saying it, like I would talk about the repetition rate of the signal being the frequency of the signal, but that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
These are some good ones.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, sorry, I interrupted. I'll kind of lump these together. Is it safe for people who are extra sensitive to EMFs, and are there studies on long-term use that show PEMF safety?
Yeah, I mean, again, the safety requirements, if you want to follow ICNIRP guidelines, every single good low-intensity company I know are well within both frequency and intensity of very safe levels. High intensity, no. I would not. I mean, again, I wouldn't use it on myself, let alone recommend it to anybody else. I wouldn't even use it short, even though I sometimes will make a concession to high intensity and say, well, maybe for acute situations, for pain relief, or athletes get back on the field, or for horses before the Kentucky Derby. But again, if it were me giving guidance to somebody, I still wouldn't even recommend high intensity in those contexts. But you just have to understand, some people want to get a cortisone shot, numb their pain, versus to try to truly heal their problem, right? Or maybe everybody wants to heal their problem, but they're just so focused on getting rid of their pain, they're not realizing all the harmful side effects that come from cortisone injections. And it blinds them to the side effects because they just want to turn the pain off. And it's like same with the opioid crisis. I did a whole video on the opioid crisis and pain. It's sad. I had some people, unfortunately, even a past girlfriend that had an opioid addiction that just consumed her. I mean, and but it's again, they get all this overprescription of Percocet, Vicodin, and all this opioid, or even straight up oxycodone or morphine. But yeah, so the high intensity definitely can be problematic with side effects, and I've seen it. Again, I wouldn't just say that I've seen it firsthand. But low intensity, the only thing that I've really honestly seen is sometimes with electrohypersensitive people, they're just overly sensitive to any energy. And with people that just get a Herxheimer, a genuine Herxheimer reaction, a genuine healing crisis, and they don't want to, or this does happen though. The pain will sometimes, if you have an injury, and this is actually published in PMF literature even, the pain will sometimes reported to increase before it gets better. But then it gets better. When I hurt I've hurt myself a lot of times and worked with PMF, and it's worked every time. The one time I really hurt my hip really badly, I remember the pain definitely intensified that night when I did it. It got worse. But the next morning, it was so much better. And I'm like, oh, that's what I saw firsthand how that can happen sometimes. So sometimes people will complain, you just get these people, it's like, oh, it's not working, it's making me worse. It's like, you just try to talk them off the ledge, right? It's like, no, it is helping. But I have not seen it, the low intensity, low frequency, I've not seen hurt anybody.
That's great. Which EMF biohacks are most worth it? I guess like affordable, easy. Like I've had some interesting guests on my show that recommended like aluminum foil, ways to use that to help mitigate things.
So for what now? What's for the EMF or PMF?
EMF. So I guess just to help, mitigate Wi-Fi. Like I guess unplugging your router at night is probably a good start. Right?
Yeah, I know. I give recommendations in my book, and you actually, as far as the devices go, you might be more up to date than I am on actual devices. But I'm always a big fan of being proactive, meaning there's a lot of things you can be proactive, like opting out of smart meters. I mean, if you're going to rent a house or, move somewhere new, look at antennasearch.com before you move. Don't live right next to a cell phone tower. The Brazilian study showed that you have a statistically significant increase of cancer if you live within a quarter of a mile of a cell phone tower. Now, a quarter of a mile is it's not a huge distance. So you got to be kind of really close for this to be statistically significant. But, and like you said, turn your Wi-Fi off at night or use, if you're really sensitive, just use Ethernet cables. You can buy the really long ones. It's just a little bit of a snafu with having these long cables. I did that for a while, and I just I'm in a concessionary period right now. I'm probably going to get back to doing that because I don't like to have the Wi-Fi on. But anyway, it's a convenience thing. It's just hard sometimes because I want to take my laptop outside or something. It's like, oh shoot, my wire won't go that far. But let's see, the smart meters. Obviously with cell phones, we can't avoid them. I mean, I usually have mine in the stand. I try to use speakerphone a lot and not. Again, I'm only using the phone because I had problems with my laptop. But yeah, it's just really being proactive to try to clean up your inner environment. And obviously, you don't want to be sleeping on the other side of the wall, being like a refrigerator or high energy appliance right on the other side of where you're sleeping.
Yeah, I did that. I did that last year, Brian. I was renting a house that had a Wi-Fi enabled refrigerator that couldn't turn it off. I would have had to unplug the refrigerator to turn off the Wi-Fi. And the bed was like, I don't know, 8 feet from the refrigerator. And my sleep was just horrible.
Yeah, no, that's a good, that's important. And even like, obviously, like, with your phone, try to keep your phone on airplane mode. If you're really not using it, and it's nice too to have some time off from the phone. Do your best to minimize maybe social media. Most people overdo it with social media, including me sometimes. But if you have to work on the computer or the phone, I mean, that's different. But in your free time, it'd be great if you could find ways to get outside or get away from all the electromagnetic stuff. That's just lifestyle choices, right? That'll just, but as far as the actual act, and PMF does help too, like I mentioned. I mean, it does help. I tell people like dirty electricity is kind of an interesting word. So it's almost like you do accumulate this electrostatic or energetic dirt of sorts, quote unquote, in your aura or your energy field. And when you lay in a PMF device, it's almost like giving yourself an electromagnetic shower or bath. In a sense, it's just kind of, but then it's just like if you shower a kid and he goes back out in the mud, he's going to get dirty again. So that's why doing a PMF session a couple times a day will help to offset the electrosmog proactively. But I would still get some kind of maybe whole house shielding device. And again, this is something, like I said, you probably know more than me about this right now. But there are some devices that you can have in your house that helps to kind of create, besides going to get the paint like you did in the whole Faraday cage thing. But that is my next certainly one thing I really want to research, and I actually want you to send me the link to a couple of those things that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I grounded it, so I grounded the paint.
Oh yeah, oh you did, okay.
Sorry, there's a little feedback, but no, that was great, and I really like that analogy you gave of the electromagnetic shower, because I was a cannabis delivery driver for a few years, and just a lot of driving around California, and that would always just kind of unground me, just to be driving for that long all day long. And at the end of the day, I would just go, because it was near the beach, I'd go and barefoot at sunset and just look at the sun as it's falling with my feet in the wet sand. And I just remember every time it felt amazing. It felt like just like a huge relief. Yeah.
No, when I lived on Siesta Key, I didn't do it every day, but I mean, I had fits and starts where I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, that's something I really would, it'd be nice to really keep that up. I just live farther from the beach now, so it's harder, but no, the sun gazing, I mean, especially if you just don't get too crazy and look at it. I got to the point where one time I did it a little too high up, and I had I had seeing spots for like 3 days. But certainly like within a thumb width of if you put your arm at arm's length, you put your thumb on the horizon. If it's within a thumb width of the horizon, never a problem. You can stare at it dead on for like 10 or 15 minutes, you know.
That's what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually a good practice.
This is one last question, Bryant. What's the best headphone device? I'm going to guess you're not going to say AirPods, right?
Out of the loop on that one. I actually used AirPods for a little while, but that's been a long time since those things came out, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Those are the wireless little earbuds. Like, they're really popular right now.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking something different.
Okay.
No, best headphones. Boy, that's a toughie. I mean, I would say obviously anything with Bluetooth is going to probably give you more electrosmog than hardwired. I mean, I remember the old, like the blue tubes. I remember the blue tube technology. I don't know. I did that. That's what I was thinking of when she said that, or whoever's question that was. But something like that would seem to be better than having electricity come up. But then again, the sound quality is probably not going to be as good. But
yeah, I just ordered these little like ferrite magnetic clamps that like clamp onto the wire, which I don't know if that's going to do anything, but it said, I think it was like lessemf.com or something. And I'll try it out. Like I forgot to do it before this interview, but 2 or 3 hours with this in my head, probably doing something to my brain, even though it's hardwired.
Yeah, no, that would be, and of course, headphones, you can't do the Bluetooth like that because you actually got but I mean, I think that's something too, is trial and error. Sometimes you just got to try different things and just notice, because, you just do your Google research, I mean, go online, try to find out what people are talking about. And if enough people, that's a lot of times what I'll do, right? Enough people start talking about something, I'm like, okay, maybe there's gotta be something to this. And then I'd always buy those things, right? If it's just buzz around something, everybody's getting these amazing, I always like, okay, let me try it, But yeah, you actually keep me posted on that if you try out these things, because again, the electrosmog is something I haven't really done a deep dive on lately.
Yeah. One question I had for you too, Bryant, I think this was before you came indoors. You mentioned the zapper, and I used the Terminator 2 every day for years. I didn't feel anything. I was a teacher at juvenile hall, and I just had it in my pocket during lectures and when I was helping the kids, and I just kept my fingers on the copper, and I think I would even hold it up to my body when we were showing the kids documentaries and stuff.
I had a Terminator 2 that was even one guy put like some Lemurian crystal thing inside of it, supposedly made it even better, and I didn't notice much myself. I never really got much success with the zappers. I think again, it's just too kind of simplistic. There's just not enough. That's the Terminator's one with a little penny on it, right? Wasn't that the one where they put a penny on? Yeah, I had a really souped up Terminator. It was supposed to be souped up. I'm sure it wasn't. But yeah, he did some other things to it too to make it. He started with the Terminator, then he just added some other stuff to it. He said it was better, but
yeah, mine had Orgonite inside of it.
I think he did something like that too. Yeah. So I never noticed a whole lot with that.
Me neither. Right. Yeah.
It sounded good in theory. Like I said, like you, if it's not okay, I'll try it. It's like, I'm an easy sell usually. You give me a halfway decent sales pitch on something like this, and I'll probably buy it. But
yeah, the SOTA silver pulsar I did feel though, because that's a 50 to 100 microamperes.
Oh yeah, I use that too.
27 volts. That got me sick a few times. Like it definitely shook things up to where.
Yeah, there was something I had to stop using that too for some reason. I forget I used that back in like 2003 or so. It's been a long time since I tried it, but that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's some cool stuff. But Bryant, this was so much fun. We talked about so many things, and really appreciate what you're doing. And one question I had, like for people to support you, it's buying your book, right? But probably not from Amazon, or is there a better place to buy your book?
No, buy from Amazon. I just do Amazon just because I don't like to carry a whole. I mean, there are others. I just have not really gotten around to like trying to. I know there's other options, but right now Amazon's just easy, and so just go to Amazon, and if you like it, leave a positive review. That's the nice thing about Amazon. It really helps with, I've got pretty good ratings, reviews on it, except for some of the it's funny, some of the 1-star reviews I've done some reverse engineering and figured out with some of my competitor people that didn't, like I was speaking against high intensity. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to start eventually get that up and going again with Bryant Meyers, youtube.com/Bryant Meyers.
Cool. Yeah, I'll pull that up right now, Meyers. So I have it. I haven't even seen your. Is it
a lot of? I mean, I did a whole course for Quantum University, and a lot of the information for that course, the PEMF course I did for Quantum University, is on my YouTube channel.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So I got a whole video like on what is frequency. A lot of these, and again, there's so much confusion in the PMF niche. I did like a whole science of PMF course, and but yeah, just a lot of videos there. And again, I sold my business, so I've been a little out of PMF for a year and a half, but I still use it every day, and I'm going to get back in at some point.
I like your website too, PEMFT.net.
Oh,
right? You have a lot of info.
The .net. It's not a fancy website, but there's a ton. And again, if you're going to go to that site, just please be forgiving with the grammar, because that is not an edited site. It's just a lot of information. I mean, literally, there's got to be over 100 pages long. Some of them are long scrolling pages too. And I even have like the flat Earth debunking stuff on there. So if you believe in flat Earth, I mean, I'll hopefully help you sway you that you not believe in that. But
I'll have you debate someone on this show. No, I'm just kidding.
No, please. I tried to get Patrick Tamponi. I wanted to debate David Weiss because he got David Weiss on the show, and I'm like, please, I'd love to debate him. Because I see the stuff that he's saying, and it's the same things he says over and over. He gets new stuff, but it's so easy to disprove. I mean, it's not hard.
I always just keep going back to like, what does it change? Because I've just seen people get more of an ego believing it, like I'm the center of the universe, and I don't know. That's what
of course, their big thing now is they're hiding land from us. In the recent Level Up documentary, because I was like, for the longest time, it's like, well, what in the world do they have by covering up the Earth? If the Earth is really flat, what's the benefit of them hiding that from us? It's like, so what? The Earth is flat. So this is kind of recent where they know they got to answer that question. And of course now there's all these realms beyond the Antarctic wall based on some of these old maps. And we all could have, like one guy said, we all have 1,000 acres of land. It's all about land. They don't want us to have this land. So that's kind of their answer to that. But that assumes that there isn't.
I'm good with 20 acres. I don't need 1,000.
I know. He did. It was that's what he said in the documentary. I just watched it the other night. Level Up, because I just kind of playfully debunk that. Sometimes I do find myself a little bit in ego, but I really, as a former physics teacher, it makes me sad that our younger generation is just believing everything so blindly. Well, I mean, not just flat Earth, but they're just not the critical thinking. Not everybody, but it's just. I mean, the fact that 30 to 35%, based on one poll, think that they're not sure that the Earth is round, or they think it might be, or they think it's flat. And that's a shocking number of younger generation, like 20 to 35 years old, that are. It's just sad, as a former scientist. It's like real science. I tell people, the real science of it is so much more interesting. You know, the universe and what it, you know, the physical universe is so much more interesting than what the flat Earth cosmology, which is just a dome and everything. It's pretty much Earth is the center of everything, and it's just, you know, there's I don't even know. There's no space, so it's just pretty much the dome. And these other realms, they keep changing their story. The dome now is like it imprisons us from the other lands. Where before the dome was some sacred thing with their magical sun and moon at 3,000 miles above the surface. And again, I've got like I collected over 200 proofs to show that the Earth is not flat, and it's just overwhelming. I mean, just one thing after another that they can't explain, and so that's on that site too. I just mentioned that on the show because I do have a link there, just because so many people are believing it. I mean, some of my friends, and I'm just shocked. It's like, oh no, you too? It's like, of course. At the end of the day, you know, if it makes you happy to believe the Earth is flat, I mean, I'm not going to stop you from believing it. Obviously, I can't. But so anyway.
No,
that
could
be another show. Maybe I could do a whole show on that. And I only say that because it's out of kind of your, you know, what you're teaching, but it does kind of get to kind of cognition and critical thinking. It can be like a case study and just really looking at the evidence without blindly believing something, right?
Right.
And it's true with PMF too. It's like, don't just blindly believe PMF works. I mean, there's over 30,000 studies, over a couple hundred double-blind. I mean, several hundred double-blind studies, even clinical studies. So that's the beauty of the proof, you know. And
yeah, well. And your YouTube, I'm looking at it, all the different videos you have, because there were a few questions we didn't get to, and like for bone health, you have one for fractures and osteoporosis. Yeah. So it's great for people want to dive in and see that.
No. I mean, let me just say that really quick. I mean, the original reason that PMF was developed, or the first application was for bone stimulation. So that the richest history with PMF therapy is actually with healing fractures, and even non-union fractures that don't heal after several years can be healed with PMF. And it is FDA approved, by the way, for non-union fractures. And
wow.
You know, the Orthofix, I think it's a certain brand that goes way back to, you know, this, gosh, I don't remember the dates, but it's like the 70s when Robert Becker and the Body Electric, one of his colleagues, Andrew Bassett, they collaborated. Andrew went with the PMF route more, and then I think Robert Becker stuck more with like microcurrents. But they both do the same thing. And that's what Andrew Bassett showed. It's like the coils will induce healing microcurrents and give the same benefit that these evasive probes were going down to basically into the bone, right? And so he was really one of the pioneers of PMF therapy, was Andrew Bassett. I mean.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot to ask you, like, books that you recommend on PEMF therapy besides yours, the good ones that you've read. Or
I'm really waiting for another one to recommend. It's unfortunate that you know, a couple of books by Dr. Pollack, which are, you know, in some senses they're decent references for research, but the science is wrong. You know, as I mentioned, he recommends high intensity based on the inverse square law, and that's not how fields drop with time. And then because of that, he wants you to buy a high intensity machine. He recommends only high intensity. So now some of his old videos, I love his older videos because he used to work with QRS and recommended lower intensity. So he just kind of switched just to high intensity. I think it was because of his own personal experience, but there really aren't any, except for like some of the books that are out of print, like the Dr. Christian Tui book and Dr. Carmichael's book, Magnetic Stem. Last I looked on Amazon, Dr. Carmichael's book was $800 because you know how they do that with out of print books.
Yeah,
they just charge an arm and a leg. But as far as books that are currently in print, there are some in other languages. I've looked, believe me, because when I researched my book, I want to read it. And not just but in general, I just want to read every book on PMF.
What about like Healing is Voltage too? That's a good one, right?
Oh yeah. Now that right. I like that book. Now that's not a book on PMF. That's a book on the device that's behind that is like a scalar or the biotenant biomodulator, which is just a scalar. But no, I've read that book two or three times. I really, not the whole thing, because when he starts to get into all the acupuncture and meridian, and he's doing it with his tenant biomodulator, right? But the first like 6 or 7 or 8 chapters are just, I just love it. I mean, because it really gives that fundamental premise that healing is voltage. The key is to increase cellular voltage. And that's one of the main things that reasons PEMF works for just about everything. Is it's working with the TMP to increase cellular voltage. So yes, there are other like energy medicine. Let's talk about energy medicine books I like. I mean, Dr. James Oshman's book on energy medicine. It's a very dense read, especially the new edition. I've gone through that 2 or 3 times, and it's so good. I mean, but in fact, if you really read that carefully, he also recommends low intensity PMF, by the way. And he gives the good reasons why, and it's based on, all the things that I talk about in my book, but he kind of will talk about that same approach in like microcurrent. And so he really reinforced in a very powerful way that everything that I was saying is true about recommending low intensity and not high intensity. But also that's definitely the best energy medicine book. I have a book on energy medicine. I haven't published it, but it's kind of it's pretty much written. It just needs to be edited. But it's not nearly as detailed as Dr. Oshman. But for a lot of people, that's just too scientific. He just gets really, but I love that. So it's just, but it's worth the read. It's worth working through, because if you really get it, it will change your life. Really if you really understand deeply what he's saying. It's the most comprehensive energy medicine book, and it has a whole section on PMF. So,
that's great. And when you said TMP, that's transmembrane potential, right?
Right, and then there's like MMP, which is mitochondrial membrane potential, which interestingly, red light seems to affect the MMP, where PMF seems to work on TMP. But that's when Dr. Tennant in his book Healing is Voltage, that's what he's talking about, is the voltage of the transmembrane potential. That's the voltage of the cell. And so it's kind of like a lot of people think that we just store energy with ATP. Well, we have another way we store energy across the cell membrane. Because again, a battery is something that separates charges, that holds potential energy. And because the cell membrane is very, very powerful insulator, I mean, it's amazing how much, I forget how many millions of volts per square meter or per meter. It's tremendous. It rivals the best capacitors as far as how much energy, because you're talking about just such a small distance across, right? But yet it can keep those charges separated. So you have in fact, well, here's the other way to look at it. You can say, well, if ATP charges everything, well, a big, like 30 to 40% of ATP goes to charging the transmembrane potential. So if you can charge the transmembrane potential directly, you're going to conserve precious ATP or energy for doing other things, which, healing the body. So at the end of the day, health is really an energy game. I mean, the more coherent energy, the healthy, coherent energy you have, the healthier you're going to be in general. And we didn't get into this, but I talk about energy flows, which is kinetic energy of movement, is in the microcirculation and lymphatic flow, nerve flow, meridian flow, right? Lung energy, air flow through the lungs, the tracheobronchial tree. And then you've got potential energy, which is stored energy when ATP, TMP, MMP. Even there's some good evidence that different tissues and organs can store energy at a larger scale. Like there's a voltage, each organ has a certain voltage. That's the sum total of all the little tiny batteries. Every cell's a little battery, right? So by increasing both the stored energy, which you could say is like the Jing in the Chinese system, right? Jing is your stored energy, and Qi is energy of motion, right? And of course, Shen is more the sublimation into more spiritual levels. But I find that very interesting that the Chinese theory of health is kind of based on this stored, increasing both your stored energy, and you also want to have good Qi energy flow too. And the two play off each other, because if you need energy to do something, you have to have enough stored energy to do it. Because so PMF helps with both. Also, red light therapy, one of the few other things, also helps with both. Different mechanisms, because the nitric oxide is increasing all the lymphatic and blood flow. And that's a really, talking about the 5 fractal branching trees. I did a whole video on that. It's so fascinating. because to me, that is one of the fundamental reasons why PMF helps the body to heal itself of everything, is the opening up all these energy and circulatory flows and increasing the amount of ATP and stored energy, or TMP, ATP, MMP. And because again, you got more stored energy, better flow. How can you get sick? I mean, so it's usually a breakdown in the flows, like stroke, heart disease, nerve, degeneration, COPD, which is breakdown in the tracheobronchial tree. You could say cancer is a breakdown in the the connective tissue matrix, which is kind of, I'm sorry, the lymph. The lymph is the store. The lymph is the kind of a breakdown of the lymphatic flow would be linked to cancer, because that's where your immune system is, right? Right. And then the meridian flow, the connective tissue matrix, as James Oshman shows, is probably the wiring for the meridian system, and that can break down too. And then you got blocked energy in your meridians, right? And there was a meridian study with PMF. So I mean, I could go on. I don't want to. We're going really, really long here, but it gets really, really fascinating when you look at these two fundamental mechanisms, how PMF is helping the body to heal itself of just about everything. Or it's not healing or curing or treating anything. It's working on these fundamental levels that if you get, if you have more energy flow or more energy stored, how can you get sick? I mean, the body knows how to heal itself if it has enough energy and enough space too. So I talk about energy. I talk about both energy and space, and I don't want to get into that, but that's detox, because obviously if your body's full of all kinds of toxic residue, the body doesn't have enough space to create healing, because to create new cells, you have to have enough space to divide, for the cells to divide. They actually have pressure sensors to see if there's enough space to divide. And so this is where and PMF does help with that detox process too. So energy and space, it's basically putting the good stuff in and getting energy in the body and getting all the waste products out. It's those two things that really fundamentally create health at the physical level, right?
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up.
Let's stop it there. Yeah, let's stop it.
I appreciate it, Bryant. Stick around as we close out the show.
Yeah.
This is a lot of fun.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry it went a little long. I mean, it's a lot of exciting stuff I love to share. So
I love it.
That is all for today's show. Hope you guys took notes on that one. I know I did. He definitely made me change my mind on a few of my beliefs about PEMF therapy. I really like his main message that stronger is not better. And that really makes sense when we look at photobiomodulation or light therapy or red light therapy. You can really overdo it and cause tissue damage. And with PEMF, it's interesting that people look for the muscle twitch to know that it's working. But I've laid on mats multiple times where I didn't feel my muscles contracting or any really strong feeling, but I got up and felt refreshed and felt very energized. And that's really what you want out of a PEMF session. I was really bummed to hear about Healthy Line, and he has that test on his website where he took it apart and put his meters up to it and found that they were actually lying about the claims. And I think if you're going for a far infrared mat, that's one thing. But if you're going for a PEMF far infrared combination, you really want to make sure that they're not just taking that 60 hertz sine wave, as he said, and switching it on and off at 7.83 hertz, because that's not good. Like you said, that is straight dirty electricity that it's pulsing into your body, which you want to avoid. So I've never tried the IMRS. I've never tried the Beamer. I don't like multi-level marketing companies, and so I'll likely not invest in either of those. And unfortunately, 99% of the PEMF devices that I've seen are multi-level marketing, which is unfortunate. But I would say you don't have to spend over $20,000 or $30,000 or even over $5,000, in my opinion, for a decent PEMF unit. Unless you're using it for your horses, you have an equestrian center and you want to keep your horses in good health, then I think maybe that $9,000 unit that I referenced from, I think it was valleyvet.com, might be something to look at. But I liked his point about cortisone and pain relief. That's really what you're after with these really overpowered, super strong PEMF units. It's just the pain killing effect. I liked what he said about grounding or earthing sheets, because I often emphasize that context. And it's not to scare people to say it'll harm you if you plug in your Mitolife sheet to the third prong in the outlet. It's just context. So there's so many factors, I think more than we know. But is there a difference when you have, say, 10 Stetzer filters plugged in your house, and then you plug in your grounding sheet from Mitolife into the third prong? I think so, versus not dealing with dirty electricity at all, because that's really what we're talking about when you're connecting to the wall with your silver embedded sheet to sleep on. But if you're doing rod to earth and you're still getting negative benefits, at that point, I would just invest in a Magnetico sleep pad, because your environment is probably pretty unnatural with a lot of non-native frequencies and maybe a population dense city. And so you might need something stronger than grounding to protect you, which would be being in a strong magnetic field, whether it's 5 Gauss, 10 Gauss, or a 20 Gauss. I really liked his analogy that laying on a PEMF mat is like doing an electromagnetic shower, because I've felt that so many times in my life with different things. But that practice that I described to him of being barefoot in the wet sand, looking at the sunset directly, and how that just charged up my nervous system and also felt like a release. That felt like an electromagnetic shower. But not everybody has the luxury to A, go to the beach every day, or B, live close to the beach, because to me, that also comes with living around a whole lot of other people, which comes with each person has an average of 7 microwave bidirectional devices, and that comes with its own issues. And so you have to pick your battles. And to me, I feel better living away from people, away from a population dense area. And that tends to be the mountains with a lot more trees, a lot higher density of trees, and pine trees, cedar trees, all these trees you found in mountainous areas in the forest. That has its own grounding effect that to me is different, not better or worse than, but just different from the grounding effect of being actually on a beach. So if you want to learn more about Bryant's work, I'll put the link below where you can check out his book on Amazon, and also his website, PEMFT.net. That's really important if you own a PEMF device or you're looking to buy one. He debunks a lot of stuff on there. I was really bummed about the Healthy Wave one, because that was one that I've used over the years. And he says just a cheap Chinese product from Alibaba, which is not good. If you're spending money, you want it to be something quality and something that's safe and effective. So like I said, Bryant's not affiliated with any PEMF company. I'm not. As far as I know, most of them are multi-level marketing, pyramid schemes, and I'm not a fan of those. So if I find one that I like, I'll put it on my website. But until then, I'll probably just stick with my Somni Resonance for sleeping. One thing I forgot to mention, after we recorded, I was talking to Bryant about all of the clinical studies on PEMF. And if you go to PubMed.com and just search PEMF, there's about 800 that show up. And then if you put in pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. There's about 100 that show up. And what's interesting is Bryant said there's actually about 30,000 total studies on PEMF therapy, but it's under like 15 different terms. So it's a little tricky when you're trying to study because you have to search on PubMed or Science Direct, or whatever other website you're using, all of these different terms to find the studies. Check out Bryant's YouTube as well. Put the link to his book, his website, and his YouTube channel. And I think he's just putting out great information about this subject because there's so much disinformation, as he talked about all the quantum PEMF devices that are out there, the Taurus devices that are just giving this field a bad name and really diluting the actual science and power that this therapy could have to help someone return to balance. If you want to support me in the show, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. I have my recipes up there, which I just updated. I changed the ratios for the gummies. And what I learned recently from my girlfriend is that you can use honey instead of sugar. So a lot of people are adverse to using white refined sugar, which I don't see as a huge issue in context. But if you want to go more natural or you're worried about that, you can just use your raw local honey, but just add it at the end so you're not cooking it to a high temperature. And to me, that has tasted really good. Even without the sugar, I was really surprised how good that tasted. And on my website, if you go to shop, that's all of my recommended products, all the products that I've used or am using and have seen a benefit from. Like I said, that Somni Resonance. So with my discounts right now, it's $312, and it looks like it's going to last forever. It's really well built, and I just slap that on my chest every night before I go to bed, and it sends a 50 milligauss signal to your brain that stimulates deep sleep. And it really works. I mean, it knocks me out. I've been measuring my sleep with the old Aura Ring. I don't recommend the new Aura Ring. Get a lot of questions about that. Their version 3 uses a really bright green light. And I mean really bright. The first night I wore it, it was lighting up under my covers, and I could almost see it coming up through the covers. It was that bright. So unfortunately, green light suppresses melatonin production like blue light almost as powerfully. And so if you can get an old used Aura Ring, or you bought one back in the day like I did, hopefully you didn't lose it. I'm very lucky that I didn't lose it through like 5 different moves of homes, and I'm back to using it. And it's a really cool feedback system. I put it in airplane mode before I go to bed, and I'm able to track my heart rate variability, which seems to be pretty accurate, and see if it's trending up or down. And lately, it's been trending up with all of these different experiments and stacks that I've been doing before bed, which I'll probably share on the Mitolife Academy here soon. And it's just been really fun and cool to see my progress improving my sleep quality. You can go to mitolife.co to check out the Mitolife products. As of this recording, there's about 100 bottles left of the elk velvet antler that's sourced from the northern United States. And we just released a new product, beef liver, but not just beef liver, it's actually spiked with copper bisglycinate. That's my favorite form of copper, and I feel so good from it. I've been averaging 10 milligrams a day of copper, and I think that's a very modest amount, especially if you take it with food. A lot of people, if they take too much copper and get nauseous, usually that's because it's on an empty stomach. But if you start at 2 milligrams, 4 milligrams, and work your way up, I've even taken 20 milligrams in a day of copper bisglycinate, and I feel like it's given me better sleep, more energy. I mean, copper's involved in so many things, but when you combine it with retinol and beef liver, that's a really powerful combination. And a big reason why I came out with it is if someone doesn't want to take cod liver oil for the retinol, then they could at least try this and see if they get an effect. If they think they've been vitamin A deficient for their entire life, like myself, they can see if freeze-dried beef liver increases their retinol level. So that's it. Make sure to check out the Mitolife Academy. That's my private VIP YouTube membership where you get 2 private videos a month and then a live Q&A the last day of the month. And you could ask me anything, and it's usually a fairly small group, so you could just ask as many questions as you want. And I share my latest experiments and supplements, devices, protocols. I'm always researching and trying new stuff, so it's fun to interact with you guys and share that there. So that's it. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.